Darn.
Don't push it over on my side, all I'm saying.
I will be back. I left my
Oh, no.
Office back there.
Welcome everyone to the March 13th, 2023 meeting of the Paloma City Council. I'm Ruth Kazia, I'm the council president, and I am sitting in for Mayor Chaz Jones this evening. So this evening, we'll be starting with the Urban Renewal Agency agenda. But before we do that, I wanted to acknowledge the passing of a member of our community from one of our prominent families. Francis Girding was 101 years old, passed away last weekend. And he was also a World War II veteran. So I expect perhaps councilors Nielsen and Crocker have taught some of his children and grandchildren.
It's true. Grandchildren, yes.
But in any case, I just wanted to acknowledge that issue. Okay. Moving on to the Urban Renewal Agency agenda, if we could begin with the roll call.
Absolutely. Jessica Andrade, present. Diane Crocker,
Here.
Matt Lehman,
Here.
Christopher McMorrin,
Here.
Teresa Nielsen,
Here.
Ruth Kazi.
Here. Thank you very much. Our first item on the agenda is the approval of minutes of June 13th, 2022. And I would remind our new council members that even if you were not present at that meeting, you can vote to approve or not approve the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
And a second. Thank you. Moved by Councilor Lehman, seconded by Councilor Andrade. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is the appointment of the 2023-2024 budget officer. And I believe there is a suggested motion here. Would someone like to make a motion, or I can move to appoint Finance Director Mike Marzinski as budget officer, as the 2023-2024 budget officer under the supervision of the city manager. Do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. And with that, I will adjourn the Urban Renewal Agency meeting.
All right, we'll see y'all in 2 weeks.
it's a privilege. I need to go get something from my car. May I go get that real quick?
Sure.
Thank you.
Well, everyone, I'll just note there's a couple handouts that were presented in front of you. Those are, for the most part, one of them is a new item to be added, E4, and we'll address that here in a moment. The other related to the utility rates as a replacement, so it'll be replacing what was previously in your packet when we get to that point. So don't set those too far aside.
Okay, I think, I'm not sure how long she is going to be, but.
She rode her bike here, so it's going to be a.
Having fun.
I'd give just a minute, another 30 seconds. I think she'll be right back.
Talk about Moana.
That's next
I'm
week,
going
right?
Thursday and Saturday.
Yes, I'm going Thursday.
Or this week. God, I gotta get it
Yes.
together.
Yes.
It's this week. I know what's going
Yes.
on in our schools, if anyone asks.
Yes.
I heard the rumor.
Did we get 2 candidates for?
I think there's one for position 2. I don't know what it is for.
All right.
She's right there.
Apologies.
No worries, welcome back.
All right, city recorder, could we have the roll call, please?
All right. Jessica Andrade,
Present.
Diane Crocker,
Here?
Matt Lehman,
Here,
Christopher McMorrin,
Here.
Teresa Nielsen,
Here.
Ruth Cozy,
Here. Thank you. Okay, I would like to note one change to the agenda. Following public comments, we will have the presentation of Resolution 2306 in support of Benton County bond measure, so that Commissioner Weiss and Sheriff Van Arsdale can exit stage left if they wish. Okay.
And then, Councilor Krause, do you want to get consensus to go ahead and add agenda item E4 under new business?
Yes, of course. We do have an agenda item dealing with
Funding Memorial Day
funding the
celebration.
Memorial Day celebration, which Mayor Jones forgot to include at the end of the last meeting. So that is, if everyone is all right with that, we would like to add that as an agenda item and discuss whether or not we wish to fund that. Okay, everybody's, okay. All right, so moving along then, do we have any public comments this evening?
I do not have anyone signed up.
Okay, great. Then with that, I will ask the sheriff and the commissioner to step forward, and I understand you have a presentation on the bond measure.
Well, we are happy to answer questions that you might have. I do have, so I emailed everyone, but I think
you guys want to share that corner?
spam filters may have weeded out the documents that I sent. President Kazi were kind enough to forward that along. So I mean, I could give my 3-minute kind of spiel, or you guys could just ask us questions.
I'd like to
Prefer.
speak.
I have a question about the navigation center. I'm wondering who is going to be operating inside of that. It just says agencies and other organizations, and I was wondering if you could just kind of fill in that blanks on that a little bit.
Yes, so that would be the Corvallis Daytime Drop-In Center with Allison Hobgood. So that's a project that they are heading up and that we are contributing to. Anything to add, or is that good?
I'm not certain who would be in there yet. It's still a conceptual idea, and what Allison's sharp. And so, I mean, she's gonna have the right resources there. I know that in the most recent conversation, CSC, who else can you say, consortium?
Peggy?
Peggy, they were all in the same conversation. And so the right people are at the table talking about what resources are gonna be necessary for the navigation center. I'm looking forward to it as a great resource for law enforcement.
And along those lines, I was wondering what happens like today if there's a law enforcement encounter with someone who's having a mental health situation. Can you talk to us about what happens now?
So it depends, we're governed by certain statutes, and the statute basically says, danger to self or others. If probable cause exists to believe they're a danger to themselves or others, currently they go to the hospital, and we have one bed that's dedicated in the hospital. If they commit other criminal acts, they can go to the facility, but I only have 2 holding and 2 waiting cells. And so if somebody's having behavioral and mental health issues and they committed crimes, they go into this a single cell, and now they've shut down the facility when those 4 beds are occupied. And those 4 beds can get occupied by people under the influence of drugs or alcohol, behavioral, mental health, or if they're violent towards staff or others. before they can be classified, they have to go into this facility and be classified, so they go by themselves. And once they're in there, if they make statements or actions or are visibly under the influence, they can't go back. And so last year we had to shut the facility down 22 times as a result of having those 4 holding cells occupied.
Gotcha. Okay. And then as far as services go, is there a process by which, so let's say you're under the influence of something, you have to stay there until you're deemed to be not under the influence anymore, then what happens to you at that point?
So it depends on what level of crime you commit, and so if you say you commit a DUI, if you're over an 08, then you stay in the facility until you're under an 08. If you're under the influence of controlled substance, you stay in the facility for 12 hours, and then we determine what you do. Because with Senate Bill 48, now you have 3 classifications or 3 categories. So category 1 would get a photograph and a fingerprint and a court date and release. Category 2 would get those same documents plus a release agreement if there was a victim, and then category 3s would be held. So if you're a DUI, typically you would get your citation, your court date, you'd be booked, and then you'd be given a release agreement saying, no alcohol, no place where intoxicants are served, a whole litany of things, and you'd be released as well at that point. Now, when you are released, we have a pamphlet, and there's some services. It's a trifold. It's really a pretty detailed list, and it's been vetted by all the groups in the valley that are part of any services that we can offer. And so if they say, what about this? Like if say they're a veteran, we would try and put them in touch then with somebody through the veterans. But that's at the booking process at the facility. If we had the navigation center, and when we get the crisis resource center, now we can start sharing that responsibility, making sure people are getting where they're supposed to go. And that's just that continuum of care. And so instead of just out the back door you go, now they go someplace where maybe they're familiar with the resource, the individual, the facility, whatever it might be. And so if they're familiar and that continuum of care continues to happen, we're hoping we can reduce the recidivism rate then at that point.
Okay, thanks.
Sheriff, when you say you had to shut down the facility 22 times, I assume that means that you could not admit any additional people.
Correct.
Okay.
Is the crisis center specifically for mental health? And is the homeless a separate entity, or is that somehow mixed in?
They're 2 separate, so we are building the Crisis Resource Center, which is already funded, it's not part of the bond. The Navigation Center would be different.
Okay.
And anyone who would like to self-refer or be brought in by other law enforcement partners, or et cetera, could come into the Crisis Center.
It'll be nice in the community to have another place to go besides the jail or the hospital.
Yes.
And again, that continuum of care, you'd be surprised when people are in crisis and they walk through the door and they're like, oh, I know you. And that can de-escalate it just like that as well. So it would be nice to have another resource available in the community.
Any other questions? Yes.
Also, I'm sorry, I'm running over a bag here. Just, can you talk maybe a little bit about the land acquisition piece of this? I guess both for there's the campus, but then is the Homeless Navigation Center, it's not part of that campus, right? So I guess, can you just sort of explain all the different pieces of land and how we got them?
So the Navigation Center location is to be determined. We're tossing around either remodeling or expanding the current facility where it is, or possibly finding a new location. The campus is the one off of Highway 20. And was there a eminent domain question in there?
Well,
not?
if that's part of it, then yes.
I mean, yes, so that is the process that the county is currently going through. It's an open case, so I can't comment too much on it. I can say that our courthouse is part of phase 1, and that is being built. We are moving forward. We have that funded. So I've heard some people say, well, I don't support the eminent domain piece, so I'm not going to support the bond. I would say voting no on the bond is not voting no on eminent domain, because the eminent domain part's still going to go through. So if you vote no just on that piece, it's not going to make an effect, other than we're not going to get a new correctional facility and all these other services that we really need.
Has the eminent domain process gone through already?
So we are in the process of it. We have deposited $5.477 million into an account with the court. McFadden LLC did take the money. And the court date is scheduled for sometime in February of 2024.
So how can you start construction if you don't technically have them?
So part of the eminent domain process includes, I forget the wording, but we once you file and put the money in the account, then you basically have the land. You have, I don't know if ownership is the right word, but essentially ownership. And the right to come on the land and do what you need
So
to.
the money goes into the account, and like the commissioner said, they've received that money, but then it'll go before a jury trial, and the jury will determine if that's the right amount, if there needs to be more or whatnot, but at that point, we have possession.
So we're not negotiating possession now, it's just the
Yeah,
price.
we have possession now, it's just that.
That's the
final
word I was
price
looking
tag.
for, thank you, possession, yeah.
Okay.
So,
Thanks.
The navigation property, are you thinking the CDDC property, which is extremely small?
so at this point, I mean, we're not the only people involved with that, so, Allison Hobgood and
Yes,
whoever
I
else would
have
have
worked
to be
with her,
involved in that
yeah.
situation, so the decision's not been made yet.
She's wonderful.
Yes.
Any other questions?
Just one more. I just got to ask this. Do we need to have a 120-bed prison or jail?
We do, and I based that on CGL's findings several years ago now. If you look at what we currently have, which is a 40-bed facility, and that 40-bed facility, since I've been the sheriff in the last 2 years, the most we've gotten to is like 35 people in the facility. I rent 22 beds in the Dalles and 10 in Polk, and so I have a transport team that runs several times a week to the Dalles and to Polk. And I was saying before we started, like during this last weather incident, my transport team got turned around in Portland and they couldn't get to the Dalles. And so I had somebody that was releasing from the facility in the Dalles. I had to give them per diem for 2 days, two nights in a hotel and a bus ticket when Greyhound ran again to get them home because my transport team doesn't work on the weekend. And so a 120-bed facility, it's one of these, right? Now you have some consequences, some accountability. There's room now for, I mean, if you haven't been in the facility, I encourage you to take a tour. Right now, there's no room for any classes, any sort of rehabilitative classes or courses, anything to do with betterment, whether it's an AA class or a parenting class or anger management, anything. There's just no room in the facility. And then just given the fact that if you look at it was built in 1976, and when the doors opened, it was outdated the minute they opened it, because it was built as a temporary facility with a regional jail in mind. The regional jail never happened, and Lynn County built a 230-plus bed facility, and Polk County built a 190-plus bed facility. Lincoln's got 160-plus bed, and you go down to Lane County, they have 500-plus. We have 40. And so that's just kind of what we've had since 1976. And you can only do so much with a 40-bed facility that's built the way it is as well. And so we're constantly, if you have recommendations or suggestions after a tour, I take it. I mean, we put pass-throughs in all the doors. If you look around all the conduit that's holding, we always worry about the courthouse and what's going to happen with the courthouse. Well, the foundation of the courthouse is the jail. But we always joke like it'll still be standing because there's so much conduit and wiring. It's ridiculous, everything we've had to do to try and keep that facility afloat. But we need a modern facility, and like I talked about a little bit earlier, that continuum of care. Taking people to the Dalles, that takes them away from their support and their system and their people. And so now they're gone, they're someplace else, and then they come back here and we expect something magical to happen. But we need to take care of our folks. And this was really driven home to me when I worked in Baker County as the undersheriff for the last 4 years. A county of 16,000 people, you'd go to Safeway and people, hey, undersheriff, and you turn around and it's like, well, you were just in the facility, but they're in your community. Mm-hmm. And so we have an obligation to make sure we're taking care of the folks that are in our community because they're going to release back here. And so we just need to make sure we give everybody that opportunity to succeed.
Thanks.
Go ahead.
So I've asked this question several times before at the open houses, and I don't really get a satisfactory answer, for me at least. looking here at the Benton County Criminal Justice Assessment from 2019, it looks like past crimes have mostly been property and behavioral crimes. And to me, that sounds like something that could be corrected more with more investment in the crisis center or a navigation center, and I don't remember exactly what the names are, but rather than investing in a jail center that houses more people there, why not invest more in the steps leading to incarceration rather than, incarceration?
So I think, as you'll see, the result of the criminal justice assessment is that to have a functional justice system, all of the pieces need to be working together. And we did choose, or I should say the county that was before me, they did choose, the best practice model and methods. And what was the blank number is when that, but we need the care and the state, we need the accountability. It's not just property crimes. We have people who sexually assault and do terrible things to children. And they need a place to go. We can't just put them in a navigation center or a crisis.
With a community of 100,000 people, unfortunately, it's the reality. There's folks that commit crime. And so you have to, like you say, that Karen said, you have to find that balance. And so currently the folks that are in the facility are kind of the worst of the worst. And then we ship folks that are on pre-trial that maybe are waiting to go to trial. Well, if they're cooperative and they are classified properly, we can send them to Polk County. So I've got 10 people in Polk County. So if I've got 33 in my facility and 10 people at Polk County, now I'm at 43. And I've got 22 beds rented at Norcor for post-prison supervision, parole and probation cases, or convictions. And if you are convicted and get county time, then that's less than a year. Over a year, you go to the Department of Corrections, and that's a completely different thing. But the folks that go to Norcor are the folks that are given county time for whatever it might be. And so that's where they're at, and that's 22. So when you figure I got a 40-bed facility, 22 and 32, we're at 72 beds already. And if I were to occupy those beds, that's, you're at 72, and that's without the post-prison supervision. Currently, I have folks that turn themselves in on Mondays and Thursdays, and we hope they turn themselves in so they can go serve their post-prison. They've already been to prison, and they've somehow violated parole. And so now we expect them to turn themselves in because I don't have a place where I can put them. And so now if somebody does something that's on post-prison supervision, and now I can just say, you're going to the facility for 2 days, 3 days, whatever it might be. Now I have room. Now I hope they turn themselves in so I can put them on a bus, take them to the Dalles. And then they go up to the Dalles for 3 days, you go back up, pick them up, and bring them back. It's just, it's not a functional system. It just isn't. And so that's, I agree with you wholeheartedly with the seriousness or the seriousness of the offense. But with Senate Bill 48 now, with category 1, 2, and 3 crimes, folks aren't necessarily held in the facility. And so now that's taken into account. And so that's something that's been looked at. And so like a fail to appear, Benton County's got a horrific failure to appear rate. The national average for fail to appear is 5%. And when I got here, our fail to appear rate was at 30-some%. I have a pretrial team now of 2 deputies that work tirelessly at sending texts, emails, phone calls, visit, whatever it might be, to ensure people make their court dates. And our fail to appear rate has dropped to about 16%, but there's still no consequence for their actions if they fail to appear, and folks know that. So they commit some crimes in Benton County because they know, what are you going to do? There's no place for me to go. But if they go across the river to Lane County, we've got a 231-bed facility. You go over there and commit a crime, there's a little bit more accountability on that front end. And then lastly, this is just something we haven't touched on. If I don't have to send people to Norcor where the resources are, and they have resources at Norcor, our folks who go to Norcor receive some assistance, and it's a great thing to see when you go to Norcor. And then I went up there recently, and I was like, hey, I know that person there, right? And it's a local Paloma person, and I was like, I know that person. Like, yeah, they're playing by the rules, and know what they're supposed to be doing. I'm like, that's awesome. That's what we need here, not in the Dalles.
Thank you very much.
I have one.
Yes. Oh, sorry.
I asked this question, but they're spending $1.5 million a year transporting students and students.
Teacher.
Well, some of them are probably.
What are the
Adults in custody.
adults in custody and for the board? So, boarding of them. So, $1.5 million a year we would save if we had enough beds here.
And it's between 1.2 and 1.5. It's somewhere in that range, and it's not going to get less. You know that.
The homeless portion of this bond to benefit homelessness, could we be more specific on exactly how that will address this and how it will benefit those individuals that have this
Sure,
crisis?
so the $3 million is going to go to expanded facilities for the navigation center. So remodeling the building, purchasing a building, something like that.
No more specifics on the direction they're going to be going?
That's what we know so far, I believe, unless you have anything different. So,
Thank you.
and I'll say too, so we've talked about, the correctional facility and sheriff's office and the homeless navigation center. The bond also includes emergency operations center, which will also be part of the sheriff's office, which is something, I think we've all seen over the past few years with COVID and wildfires and how critical that is to our community to be able to coordinate well. And then the other piece is expansion of our children and families program. So we will be remodeling our current Sunset building. The children and families program right now runs from a little building on 9th Street. It's too small. They do their best, but remodeling a building with an eye toward this is what it's going to be used for. It can be trauma informed. They are planning larger rooms so that whole families can receive mental health services, and just expand the amount of people that can get in and see people. Right now, there's a 3 to 4 month waiting period. So that's not ideal. That's, okay, my kid's having a problem. Okay, well, can you have them wait 3 or 4 months? That's not really a good answer.
Yes.
The men's shelter, is that part of anything? That's a whole separate thing. So
Yes.
there's no real temporary housing available for the homeless situation, correct? Is that what I'm understanding?
I'm not sure I understand your question. So there's not a homeless shelter included in the bond, if that's what you're asking.
Yes, with a place for them to take showers or wash clothes or anything like that.
I don't know all the parts that would be included in the navigation center. So like I said, the 3 million is just one piece of it. I think the total project is 14.2 million. So it would just be county's contribution.
Other questions?
And what are the major differences between this bond and bonds in the past that have failed?
I would say this time around, we took a comprehensive overview, 5 years shaped by our community, extensive public outreach. We hired a consultant who compiled metadata, which that definition of that is in the criminal justice assessment that Jessica referenced. So I would say we really, really did our homework this time. And if I remember correctly, in 2015, people weren't happy about the location over here. So we did do extensive outreach for the location, and we heard very strongly from community members that they didn't like the South Corvallis location. They didn't like the West Hills location. They thought that was the ideal location. It's not near any, big existing neighborhoods. It's a good location for accessing the city.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank both of you for being here tonight. I was telling Commissioner Weiss, when I was first appointed, I was on the police committee and attended the Willamette Criminal Justice Council meetings where all of this was just beginning to really take shape. And I'm incredibly proud of this effort. And I hope you are too, because I think it not just addresses needs, but it actually makes the system function better. So I think it's a wonderful thing. And with that, Counselor, do we need to take a roll call vote?
So a resolution, so there's just a recommended motion in the packet.
Okay. Which is. All right. I move to adopt resolution number 2306, a resolution stating support of the Benton County bond measure. Do I have a second?
Yes.
Thank you. All in favor of the
Point of order.
We're gonna have some discussion.
Yes.
I appreciate the main goal of the bond is primarily to provide more humane carceral facilities with a small amount set aside to help address houselessness and mental health issues. However, I will not be supporting this measure. If we truly want to create a more equitable and just community, these funds must primarily be invested in addressing houselessness and mental health issues, which are factors that often contribute to incarceration in our county. Building a larger jail will only increase the number of people incarcerated without getting at the core reasons as to why incarceration happens in the first place.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right. Yes.
I guess my overarching thing with this is it feels like we are in a bit of a crisis as far as our ability to actually respond to emergencies in our community. And I don't see that getting any better. And we are not choosing between this plan and another plan. We are choosing between this plan and no plan. And I think that's sort of my bottom line is I don't want to let perfect be the enemy of the good. And I don't see a viable alternative to this that would address the crisis our community is facing without spending another 5 to 10 years going through all the stuff we just went through. And the stuff the county has already spent a large amount of money doing outreach on and doing community building on. So I definitely hear Councilor Andrade's concerns, but I guess we're not voting on what the right sort of many options is. We're voting whether we're going to do this or do nothing. But yeah.
I agree with you on all of that, but I also want to say I am thrilled that they are including the mental health and the homeless portion of it. I do think that's some of what causes our crime, and it's time for us to address it. So our police officers aren't tied up with dealing with mental health cases, that they have trained facilitators to help with that and a place to go rather than the hospital. That's crazy.
Any other comments? Okay. All in favor of the motion as stated, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries 5-1. Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank you.
coming.
Thanks for having us, and I appreciate everybody's opinion on this.
Yes.
I mean, this is a holistic project, and when we leave, I always take notes about stuff just because that's what makes us better. I didn't like be wasting your time and my time. So we just need to keep getting better. So if you have recommendations, suggestions, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm your sheriff. This is at the end of the day your facilities, and I'm just the guy that gets to keep the gate for a little bit. So
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Name, date, and then write your name and state it right there.
Appreciate your comment.
Is that the resolution? Or is that the?
Commissioner Weiss, is that a copy of the resolution or is that something separate you have?
It's something separate. It's
Okay.
the BC 400 endorsement form.
Okay.
I have a signed copy of the resolution in my file.
Council President.
And now,
Yeah. Onward.
minutes.
Onward.
All right. With that, then we'll refer to the consent agenda. Are there any items that anyone would like withheld from the consent agenda?
I have to make a comment, sorry. If I may.
You may.
We always used to tell our kids that you couldn't ask if you could spend the night at someone's house while that someone was standing right there. And I feel like that's what we just did. I feel like they came and made this presentation, answered a bunch of questions, and then we were expected to have a discussion about whether we supported what they were saying while they were standing right there. And it made me feel uncomfortable, frankly. So I just think we should have done the presentation, no problem with that. I would have appreciated if we would have voted on this per the agenda order so that they wouldn't be standing right here when we talked about what they said. Just my personal opinion, but.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I appreciate the analogy.
I think they were going to wait till you voted.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay. If there are no items to be removed from the consent agenda,
Need a motion?
I have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Okay. And second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor of the consent agenda items, minutes of February 13th, February 27th, 2023, and appointment of the 2023-24 budget officer. Please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes
Sorry.
unanimously. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. No, I was confused where we're at, but yes. Continue.
I was trying to figure out how you were going to.
I'm sorry. I was reading the thing and then, yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see, next we have 2 committee appointments for the Heritage Tree Selection Committee. There were 2 candidates, John Simonson and Eric Wiggins. Any information on each candidate was included. And the recommended motion is to appoint John Simonson and Eric Wiggins to serve on the Heritage Tree Selection Committee for a 3-year term.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Second. Very good. Any discussion of the candidates? Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. All right, and the next item is the Budget Committee, and I believe we have 1 candidate.
If I could, I heard we actually did have 2 positions open, received 1 application in, so we do still have 1 opening there. Won't preclude us from moving forward, but we'll continue to advertise that open position for an additional Budget Committee member.
Okay. Thank you. And the recommended motion is to appoint Mark Kepi to serve on the Budget Committee for a 3-year term. Yes.
I move to appoint Mark Kepi to serve on the Budget Committee for a 3-year term.
Okay, second.
Oof.
Oh,
Your hand going up.
And I know.
I didn't know it was such a racist.
That's right. We love Mark, so there you go.
Okay, all in favor of passing the motion as stated, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 Oh, is it a 2-year term?
It's a 2-year term,
I misunderstood. It's 1 position, but it's a
because
2-year term.
otherwise we mess up our rotation.
Okay,
Okay.
I screwed that up.
Okay.
Well, then I'm gonna.
There's 1 opening that's a 2-year term, not a 3-year term.
Is it a problem that we just voted to appoint
Can
him
we
to a
just
3-year
really
term?
agree that what he really said was 2?
The motion was a 2-year term, right?
Move to-
I move to fire Mark Kepi from the Budget Committee and then also appoint Mark Kepi to a 2-year term on the Budget Committee.
Do I have a second?
Does the recorder make a comment?
Yes,
I
please.
don't like what you just said.
No firing.
Okay. Wait, I move to amend Mark Kepi's term on the Budget Committee to 2 years instead of 3 years.
That's
There you go.
That's outstanding.
You might get a second for that one.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor of the revised motion, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
My apology, we had a little miscommunication. Trading City Manager's getting recorded.
That might have been the record shortest Budget Committee term if we had
That's true.
dismissed him right then. On the Budget Committee for 30 seconds.
Okay. Our next item is the strategic plan approval, and the strategic plan was included in your packets.
Yeah, so it was an attachment. It should be on the back of it wasn't in the staple portion, it's in the back. I did not include a memo for it. This is coming back after, 2 or 3 looks, I think, already, so there shouldn't be any surprises here. Most of the language in there should be very familiar to you. I think there were only a couple, maybe action items where I was left to improv and put some things in there based on the discussion at the time. Did change some of the formatting to do quotation marks, to do parentheses around the annual rather than the little Pac-Man symbol, the greater than symbol. But otherwise, this is what I heard. If there's any changes, we can still make those. But what I'd like to get is an approval on this. So staff has some marching orders looking forward for the year. We can start looking at adding some items into the budget that are going to have a budget impact on us, and we can proceed forward. Again, the intent would be that we wouldn't come back and revisit this until sometime early next year, like the January, February mark. We won't have elections this year to kind of the whole new people coming on and new appointees and everything else. So January is still kind of tough with some new committee assignments, but maybe January, February, we can look at this again, update, and roll it out. So if there aren't any specific changes or amendments, then we can just do a motion to approve.
Do I have any questions, changes, or amendments?
I guess I just had a question.
Okay.
For goal 4.6, the reduce energy usage in city buildings and vehicles. There's no actions under that. Should we have actions for that, or?
We didn't have any specifics discussed at the meeting, so if you want to add an action item there and assign a year to it, we can.
I mean, I guess like 4.6.2 almost feels like an action, but I guess maybe I'm just confused, sort of the distinction.
Yeah, the action would be like, purchase a, set money aside to, or, budget to purchase a low emission vehicle for public works this year or whatever. I mean, something more specific we would do this year. Both of these objectives are kind of an ongoing, but again, if you've got a specific action item, we can drop in there.
Is there a schedule for replacing vehicles in the city? So there's a chart or a schedule of sort?
There is. We're going to look at it later tonight in the
Okay,
capital improvement plan.
If we needed an action item, could we not have something along the line of comparing the cost of replacing the replacement schedule to adding a line for comparison of?
We're going to do this under this objective anyway, but.
Okay, I just was thinking about that. No, that's fine.
Yep.
I said not to do this, and now I'm doing it. There's a typo, I think, procure grants targeted at lowering. I think it's supposed to be lowering.
Lowering,
maybe.
thank you.
I guess I don't know if you had any thought, just since that 4.6 is sort of your creation. Okay.
If not, you'd just like a motion to approve, is that what we're looking for?
One item we could add in there, just because I know we're going through it under 4.6.1 with the construction of the water treatment facility. I know that we're working with Rick Flacco and the Oregon Energy Trust, and they're actually looking at some energy saving features there. It doesn't, everybody always thinks solar panels, but I think we're looking at light, specific lighting that's energy friendly, and they're kind of doing an audit on the engineering for that building. So as an action item for this year, we could say, let's do a kind of an energy audit, if you will, of the new Public Works water treatment facility. Again, staff's doing that at this level anyway, but it's an action item we could put in there that we could note that we're doing.
I know I had hoped that we could do that also for the city, just in general, like all of the buildings, similar to the way that the county has done that. Would it be too much to ask for that?
Today, yeah. This year, probably. Eventually, no. I think eventually that wouldn't be a bad thing to do. Those audits are available. Energy Trust of Oregon will come and do those for you. You'll need to budget accordingly because they typically find things to replace, which means spending quite a bit of money. There's some grant money that can help, but it would be trying to get an estimate, maybe doing the audit, and then it doesn't do any good to do the audit, and if we're not going to have the money and the desire to then go through and make the upgrades that they're asking for. So I just know they take some time, they take some finances, take a little bit of research to get there. But if we want to add as an action item to do next year, year after,
well,
drop something there.
To clarify, the county has done like the carbon budget assessment that I had kind of talked about before, of like they take into factor even things like commuting to work and stuff like that, and like how often the lights are on, the air conditioning, that all of that for their buildings. Is that like kind of more like a mathematical exercise, I guess, to be able to analyze where things can get cut back?
Yeah, I don't have anybody on city staff that could do that. So again, it'd be consulting with the Energy Trust of Oregon,
Okay.
or
Thank you for clarifying.
someone to come in and do that. Yeah.
I would like to add that as a future item. Yes, Matt.
I believe we're getting ready to do a remodel on the other half of the building here, right?
Yes.
So is there a way to incorporate that, some kind of energy audit in that remodeling process?
Sure.
Awesome.
And yet, yes, Matt.
So I think Christopher's question, I'm going to put words in his mouth, but I think we both agree that we'd like to see at least an evaluation of using EV police vehicles moving forward. And that doesn't, and I don't know if that needs a formal action by the council, but that is something that I would be interested in, and it seems like it should go in the strategic plan.
I guess the only thing I would amend that to is not just police, but like, the pickup trucks Public Works uses and that kind of stuff. I just feel like often the kind of stuff that city vehicles do is pretty optimized for EV use. They're not driving like, 300 miles across the state in a day. They're just kind of doing little boop, 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 boop. And they have a place where they are supposed to park every night. So it's easy to kind of charge them and everything. But I'm not saying we should switch everything over to electric immediately, but I think we should seriously look at it.
Good idea. All right, any other comments, amendments? Yes, Mike.
In Newport, we started that transition and exploration and evaluations. First thing we had to do was put the infrastructure for charging.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be the first cost that we're going to have to deal with. And it's not really that cheap. And locations, that'll be another thing that we'll have to do. So, I mean, if we're gonna go down that road, you might as well put that first, or part of it, so we don't lose sight of that. And like I said, it was not cheap. Tesla tried to do it at the Fred Meyer's out there, and it came out to like $30,000. So that's just another cost that we could probably start setting aside for an expense to cover.
And are there state funds or grants available for things like those?
Yeah, I can't remember what we funded that with. I believe we got a grant. But it happened after I left, so I don't know how.
We might be close enough to I-5 to qualify.
Yeah,
Electrifying your codes.
and you also have 20. That's
Right.
considered
Right.
a major road.
I know, but it seems like the feds are focused on the
Yeah, no,
interstate.
Yeah.
very true.
And they have the biggest checkbooks.
Yeah,
I think we talked about during the work sessions, there's a current grant out there that we already put a letter of intent in that look for EV charging stations along the streetscape project. So
Okay.
we're actively pursuing that right now. This would be the phase 3 power ones.
Cool.
I think what we're talking about is unless we're gonna have the police vehicles parked there, we'd be talking about EV stations.
Right, I think it's two
Police
separate.
department has to
Yeah,
work, so
yeah.
we're
Slows
talking
down
a little two different
traffic.
things.
That's right. Oh, it's charging, we can speed that.
Police cars all lined
All
up.
lined up charging on these.
That's right.
different photo shops.
Hit the bank, all the cars are.
Some
Okay.
level 3 chargers, you can charge really fast though, so.
That's true.
All right, any other comments or suggestions? All right, all in favor of approving the strategic plan for 2023 through 2027?
Is that the amended one?
As amended.
As amended, okay. Thanks.
Okay,
I'll second. Thank you.
thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
So that brings us to our utility rates. And
Just the replacement.
Mike, I believe this is your discussion.
So again, this one you'll want to refer to the handouts that Mike provided that are at your seat in front of you, just to replace what's in the packet with those.
right, the one package, the utility rate report, and all that change was with the motion that, when I put this together, I did not have the resolution number. So Ruth asked me to change that today, so that's the only thing that's changed since what's in the package. How would you all like me to go over this? Or do like I reported to the finance committee? Okay, all right. Mr. Mayor, when he asked me to give a high-level view and tell what happened, why are we doing this? By council rules, we do a utility rate study every year. Reason we do it is to make sure we've got the correct amount of revenue to cover our operating expenses and set money aside for capital projects down the road. Once we go through this exercise, I can put the budget together. So what I usually do is I look at the operating expenses. What are we going to encounter? And I know everybody's encountering the same thing, inflation. Our CPI projection as of January is 5.9%. I have not looked at it since. Usually it's around 3%. This time it's almost double. Employee costs, there are going to be the factors there we have to put up with or encounter: salary survey, union contracts, and PERS costs, which are going to increase by 2.54%. So what I've done on that chart, I'm showing you there what our total city costs for each of the tiers or the sections. Our biggest costs are in OPSERPs, as we call it. We have a handful of the 37 people or 32 people that are in tier 1, tier 2. So we're not going to get hit that hard, but it's still 2.54%. Capital expenses were covered by a lot of the rates that And the rate we're going to use there is the engineering news review. We did that, we used that with the system development charge increases back in January. So Chris and I felt that was a good number to use. Then what I did is I gave you a water volume analysis, what our volume has been for the last 5 years. I'm sorry I didn't put the years there. So the 212, I believe, is projected 23-24, and so the rest are from the past. I looked at the CPI, or the CPI, the per capita, which is basically the total population. It's the volume divided by the population. We're averaging about 38%, so we're pretty flat. Our volume's going up, and so our population's going up in relationship to it. So we're pretty flat. Then the next thing I gave was the number of meters. That I meant to get rid of that usage per category. That's kind of useless. But I gave you the number of meters by the certain categories that we have. We have 26 for the city. We have 12 for the schools, and that includes irrigations. And actual, they have 4 actual operating ones, I believe, and the rest are irrigation. So that's the breakout of our meters. And then our revenues for the last year, I gave the water, sewer, and ending fund balances for the water and sewer. Our water revenue can increase in this year. I'm not sure we're going to make that 1.9, so we're going to have to reel back in, look at the numbers here in a little bit. Sewer's on pace to make its 1.5. Our ending fund balances came in as the audited numbers. Now, a lot of this money that we set aside, we put it into the LBE, the Land Building and Equipment Fund. Right now, all of the money for the water treatment plan, we've pretty much taken all of the reserve of that and moved it over to the LBE for the water treatment plant, which begins next, well, the reservoir started already. So next year's amount will be predicated based on what the rates are going to come out to be. So once we go through the rate changes, which are coming up next, they'll go into effect if council approves and adopts. They'll go into effect on July 1st, 2023. For the water and sewer rates, our reserves are pretty much depleted because we put money aside. So I've increased, I projected a 75% increase to go from $4.55 per unit of water, and go from $4.55 to $5.30. That's going to keep us ahead of the inflationary pressures and set aside some money for operations. Sewer, for all of the water and sewer, the base rates are not going to change. It's just the per volume rates will go up. Sewer, I believe 50 cents will keep us level. We haven't really started moving stuff aside for that yet. But, you know, council's goal, one of the strategic plans is the 1952 era concrete pipe. And so we've moved some of those projects into this year. Street utility, the street utility fee, the storm drain fee, those are going to be increased by the engineering news record, 5.5%, 5.56. Finally, what we've done, I went through and reviewed all of the fees within there, and we're going to break out. We have a new account and a transfer fee all at $10. New account fee takes a little bit of work for staff, so we've increased that to 25. We're going to split it into a new account 25 and a transfer, which is 10, which is that's how that's going to work. We're going to do that for the residential and the non-residential, which is commercials and so on. Penalty fees, NSF fees, we get hit pretty hard by our credit card company, and we get hit by our bank. So we're increasing that from $10 to $50. We don't have a whole lot of those. We have once in a blue moon, but we still have to do a lot of work with them. The increase for the new service connections hasn't been updated in a couple of years, so we're going to increase that 20%, go from $990 to $1,100 for both residential and non-residential. Then we're going to break out the new service connections. We've got two rates. We'll have one water greater than 1 inch, and then That's going to be for market costs. We have one that's just set at nine, that's the 990 I just talked about. Then we're going to have the one, anything greater than one, we don't keep those meters around. We have to special order those. And so we're going to have a separate category that will pay costs and market cost. So that's what I presented to the Finance Committee, and then they came back with some questions. So I presented, they had asked about in the sewer, if you look at attachment, I think it's B. Yeah, we had the multi-residential base rate, we had $13 times the number of units times. We held it, I can't remember what it was, it's 50 cents for each division or something, category, I don't remember, oh, discount. We decided we're going to call it a factor of 0.05. And the Finance Committee asked me to check around and see if anybody else charges that. And the only really online fee schedules I could find was Newport, Albany, and Lebanon, I believe. We're the only ones that charge that discount. So there we got. Okay, and then low income grant, another question I was asked. State of Oregon does have a statewide low income grant program available for low income customers. So basically that's it. And my recommendation is, the city operations are getting hit pretty hard by the inflationary pressures. The 5.9, we got for CPI, we got 2.54 for the PERS increase in salary survey. We're figuring 6% increase possible. So we're facing 14.44% increase on operating costs. So we also unknown are the union negotiations. So my recommendation is to adopt the rate schedule revised and presented with new alterations. We've given you some motions and options. Any questions?
I have a couple questions. The first one is this PERS chart that you presented here. I don't understand what this means.
Okay, what that means is the last two bienniums, we paid 16.27% plus 6% for 22% on the police. So I'm showing you, I didn't show a comparison, just for next year, we're going to pay 24% for the police.
So 24% of an officer's base salary will be
Yes.
on top of it. Okay.
And the same goes for the general service and police. If you take those two, the 23-25 plus a pickup by city, that's what we're going to be paying this year. And it's a per individual charge that we don't blend it.
So I'm just still confused. So I'm looking at tier 1, tier 2, and it says for biennium 2023 to 2025, it's going to be 18.4.
That's right, correct. That's how much. That's the rate we pay into to PERS for that individual. That's their actuarial rate that they give us. The 6% it goes to the IEP. Chris, what's IEP? You remember that? I hate this. Our acronyms, we forget them all the time. It's the deferred. It's a deferred contribution. The biennium, the 18.14 is defined benefit that we pay. It's just like a retirement number. This is a number that we get from them for our. This is what we owe of our. I don't remember what our rate or our balance is due to for all the people if they were to retire. But we have to pay an 18% for a police officer on their payroll.
And then we also paying their 6%.
We pay also their 6%, right. So in other words, it's 24%. And everybody else is based on different rates.
And those rates are given to us by the state? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, they were given to us by the state. They have a actuary minimum.
Okay, thanks.
Mike, a couple of years ago, Joan made an advance payment which reduced some of our costs. Is that related to this?
That is part of that number, yes. It's in there. It's otherwise, if we did not have that, we'd probably pay another 2 to 3%, maybe even more. based on the market. This is last year's before the crash, so yeah, that number is in there.
Okay. I'm sorry, go ahead, Jessica.
I was just going to ask, I know in the meeting, the committee meeting, you had read to us what some of the charges were from the fee schedule for Newport. What I hadn't seen until the packet was the connection fee. Do we have connection fees?
Yes,
And those are,
that's the 1,100 that we're going from 990 to 1,001. That's the connection fee
Oh,
for
okay.
us.
Thank you for clarifying.
I did have a question about that also. So of that $990 going to 1,100, how much of that is the actual cost of the meter? Do you know?
The meter, well, I looked at those the other day. They're probably about $500. Is that about right,
I
Chris?
think Kevin's on, we might be able to ask the Public Works Director, I think he's listening in.
Yeah, that's right.
Kevin, did you hear the,
I don't have pricing on the regular 5/8 by 3/4 handy, but it's like $170 for the meter and about 200 for the radio read components. And then we have our time of going out and dropping them in, programming them, everything else, paperwork to get them into the system. That's where that comes in.
Awesome, thank you. And the reason I was asking is we're, as a society, I believe, trying to make a concerted effort to make housing more affordable. And, we're increasing the installation for one of our utilities, and it just seems counterintuitive to try and figure out ways to reduce the cost, but then we're also increasing costs. And I know inflation, I get it, but it just seems counterintuitive to me on some level.
Mike, I'm generally in agreement with these rates. I was struck by the increase in the return check fee. I know you said you don't get return checks very often, but going from $10 to $50.
We get charged by $35 by our bank, get $35 from our credit cards. Because some of them go through Express Bill Pay, which is sort of a credit card.
Mhm.
So we get charged that when somebody does that. So we're out $60, and not even including our time. But it helps cover at least something of our costs.
Okay.
I know it's steep, trust me. I did my research on it because I was even shocked when I saw the $35 charge from the credit card. I forgot about that when I was in Newport.
Okay, thank you for the additional information. And other questions for Mike? Jessica?
When we spoke before about trying to figure out ways to, charge what we need to get whatever infrastructure we need built, but then also wanting to conserve water and stuff. We didn't have the examples from some of these cities that charge more for commercial water usage. Is there, I guess, what is the reasoning behind charging commercial more? And do you think that that is something that we should consider?
Well, if we had time, sure. We're going to do a utility rate study. And when they do the study, they're going to review all that. And when we did that in Newport, we found what we were charging was proper. They do have a volume, quite a bit of volume. They take a lot of our time from the utility people come in. So they felt it was justified then. So, yeah, we could spend some time on it if we need to. But Now, right now, we kind of plan to put it off till we get the water treatment plant and get the reservoir built, and then do a rate study and see what's right.
Okay, thank you.
I think generally speaking, Councilor Andrade, municipalities charge more to corporations and industries because they can. They just up the cost, and businesses and industry don't have other options, and so they pay it. But it's really kind of hard to justify, how much more time do we spend on a commercial bill versus a residential bill? They look the same, they smell the same, they come in the same. You're kind of splitting hairs a little bit there, but
Yeah.
if we have somebody do the rate analysis and do some comparison, they may make some recommendations, and we can, dive into that a little bit further.
Okay,
So.
thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Yes.
On the finance committee, I have to tell you that it's hard at this time in history with inflation as it is, with families struggling to think about a rate increase and to try to think about ways that we can meet all the financial requirements of our city and stay afloat and stay viable with what expenditures we will be having. I, like Councilor Lehman, worry about that this being an environment where people can afford to live and move and have growth in our town. But thank you, Mike, for doing such a really thorough job. And I do feel that, unfortunately, I think it is necessary for us to address this and to realistically say it may be time for us to modify our utility rates to meet all of our financial responsibilities.
Do I have a motion to approve and adopt the utility rates and fees as presented in revised attachments A and B, effective July 1, 2023?
So move.
Second.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Just a question. Are we
Yes.
specifically adopting resolution 23-05 as well?
Oh, right. Yeah, look at the new, it's got the resolution, yes.
Oh,
I rephrased
Want to
that.
revise your motion?
Okay, I move the city council approve and adopt resolution 2305 with the utility rates and fees as presented in attachments A and B, effective July 1st, 2023.
thank you.
I'll stay second.
Thank you. All in favor of the revised motion as stated, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Mike.
With that, our next agenda item is the capital improvement plan review.
And Councilor Causey chairs this committee, so this went to Public Works Committee for review. So Councilor Causey, if you want to give a brief narrative, or again, I know that Kevin Fear, Public Works Director, is on, and I'm sure he could walk through it as well, or go through any of the detailed information if you'd like, however you want to go about it.
Okay, well, I will walk through it, and perhaps Kevin can chime in as needed. Let's see. Perhaps I'll start with the water page. There were not dramatic changes to the schedule. There was one addition, which I'll note, and there were some mathematical corrections that were made. But as far as I can tell, those have all been incorporated. I guess I would ask, are there any questions on the water page? Councilor Lehman.
Yeah, I was noticing for the WTP contingency, it has a project cost of $250, but a debit of $375 to the reserve. And I was wondering why there's a discrepancy there.
I will fix that.
And then also for the Neebeck Hill Reservoir seismic, there isn't a project cost, but there is a debit of $379.
Yes, and these two are brand new. There's nothing in the 22-23 year, so I didn't bring those over yet.
Okay, awesome.
So does that mean in the,
I was inconsistent though. I did 24-25. I brought them over. I need to remove those.
I wasn't going to point that out.
I will do it for you.
I know, I was wondering.
If I'm going to be committed, I'll do that. I'll clean that up.
okay. Are there any questions or comments on the sewer page?
I'll just make one note here. We did add or kind of combine the efforts for the 17th and 18th Street. If you remember, that's where we put a large portion of the ARPA funds that the city received. So those are identified here. We've lumped in 16th Street with that. So it'll be one big project, 16th, 17th, 18th Street. Before we were going to do the 16th Street sewer along with the 16th Street improvements. But pending any issues there, we don't want to lose out on the synergy of having those three projects all done at once. And so project-wise, it's now the 16th, 17th, 18th Street sewer line project, and the 16th Street project will be kind of looked at a little bit separately. Not separately, but separately. So we'll proceed with those sewer projects regardless of how things work out on 16th Street, which is still a little up in the air as far as timeline and approvals go. But this is the timeline that we're under for 16th, 17th, and 18th Street.
Okay, any questions there? Storm drain. Okay, how about the street page? The new addition here was the 19th Street and Applegate roundabout.
And, yeah, okay, sorry.
Yes.
I was just going to ask, is that specifically a recommendation from the traffic safety school traffic thing survey?
Yeah, it was. And so that report just came out last week. I'm trying to meet with the school superintendent, and so your calendars, we're trying to get another joint meeting of the city council and school board, hopefully later this month, maybe early next month, but we're trying to find a date that we can pull that together and review that report together and try to get some consensus around some of those recommendations. But just with the timing of how things always work, that was one of the bigger recommendations that was made in a larger project. So I wanted to make sure we captured it here so it didn't blurb onto the radar unannounced. We're already kind of looking at, know that that is a recommendation that maybe something we'd be looking at.
Susan, to really quickly clarify, because it's not a done deal. It is we're allocating funds in case council were to move forward with this project, correct?
Well, and when we approve the CIP, all we're really approving is the 23-24 year. So that's what you'll see in the budget. We're not allocating anything for 24-25, 25-26. Those are looking out 3 years. Where would the funds come from? What projects would be out there? Mm-hmm. So again, we're just putting them on the radar at this point to know where we're looking as far as reserves go 3 years out if these projects went through. But yeah, we're just, when you approve this tonight, we're really just approving the 23-24 projections.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yes.
It seems, the number seems low if that's going to be the number to construct a roundabout. I was just looking at the crosswalk enhancement where there already is a crosswalk is 128,000, and then building a whole roundabout out of whole cloth is only 200,000 a year later. That just doesn't seem to.
That should be prefaced with engineering.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it says down at the bottom, just preliminary, I can't talk.
I think we're trying to save going down to a second space there, but it's the engineering portion of it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Oh, it's the traffic, oh, I'm sorry, go
No,
ahead.
that's all right. Can they do the roundabout with the space they have? Because there's houses right up until,
Ask me again in 24, 25 when we do the
Okay.
planning and engineering.
and how in the world does the crossing guard go out in the middle of a roundabout? I don't know.
No bridges.
Let's just put light rail everywhere.
Yes, I like that.
Is the traffic safety report available on the website?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
And can I just ask, that traffic safety report is what recommended the Main Street crossing at 17th modification? Is that what was that recommended? What did that recommendation?
That's
come
in the
from?
report as well.
Okay.
That project is also listed in the TSP
Okay,
as a high priority project, but it was also mentioned, and that's, again, we wanted to get it on the radar.
okay.
Yep.
Okay, moving on to the park page. Any comments on the park?
Yeah, again, the math isn't working for me here on Veterans Memorial Park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what's going on there is the 248 less the 15,000 is what we're gonna be taking out of SDCs.
Mhm.
So I need to increase those two right there. That's the 23 is gonna be the SDCs. Last year was all SDCs. This year is the first year we're gonna take anything, the 50 grand out of the rate reserve.
Yeah, I'm just saying that that number adds up to 280 something.
Two, right, no, I agree. That's what it's gonna be for next year. This year, we only had 248, and the 248 was reduced by the 15,000. 50,000 is new this year for the project.
It goes in as the 22, 23 should be the total project cost,
Right.
or is that just the 22, 23
That's just
project
what it was
cost?
at 22, 23. 50 is brand new, that came from, it was brought forward.
So
Yeah, I
22,
know
23
that-
is, 22, 23 is what we've spent.
Right,
What?
okay. I can make the 50 grand go over there, don't worry, I'll clean that up. I'll make that 298. That should make things work. You know, not quite. But there is, we did spend some money on engineering.
So the project cost column is not the total project cost, it's just the project cost that's going to be incurred before July,
This year,
right?
yeah, of this year, yes.
And
That's the
then
budget.
after July, it looks like we're going to incur another 280 some odd thousand.
When we still have a balance left over, we're carrying forward 232,000. And we're adding 50. So next year's balance is gonna be 258, 282,706.
So I guess I'm not seeing how we're going to spend $248,000 in 22, 23.
We're not, we're gonna carry that forward. That's what the 232, that's the carry forward.
Right, but you just told me that the total project cost is not 248,000. That's only the project cost for 22, 23. And then you're also saying we're going to carry that into 23, 24, but then the numbers don't add up together. So I don't know what the total project cost is for the Veterans Memorial Park and how we're paying
If
for
we
it.
haven't spent anything right now, this current year, it would be 248. Next year it'll be 298.
So that adds up to like 600 and some odd $1,000.
No. Just the 50 plus the 232 is the project. I did too much accounting on this one.
So the 248 plus the 15 we already spent still doesn't add up to 280.
That should be, that's the way this is structured, it's confusing. The 15 is a reduction to the 248. That is the actual expense.
So during the committee meeting, it was my understanding that that column where the 15,394 is money that has already been spent on the project during this fiscal year.
Correct.
So 248 minus the 15 is somewhere around 233, right?
Correct.
So we have the 232,706 that corresponds to,
we're carrying it forward. That's
Gotcha.
gonna be the number next year.
and then the 50,000 is
That's
just,
what we added for the project for next year.
that's the part I don't understand. We just added 50,000 to the project.
It came from the last year's CIP, brought it forward. Or I could have been told to increase it by 50 grand.
I guess the part I'm confused about, because then like on streets, 16th Street is 1.8 million. But then that's across 2 years, but it's all accounted for in 22, 23. I guess it feels like some of them are like total project cost and some are 22, 23 project cost.
So I think to be consistent with the rest of the document, we need to change the 248,100 to 267,312, which is the total project less what we spent, the 15,394, plus the 50 plus the 232. So 232 plus the 50 is your total project, minus the 15,394, which we already spent. Total for the 22, 23 should be the 267,312.
I'm following you. I'm just wondering why we're spending 50,000 more than we thought we were going to.
It's probably an updated number that we got from Chelsea based on project,
Did it have to,
but I'm not 100% sure.
Is that the grant being spent?
It's coming out of the park reserve, but I don't.
Well, it's coming, but I'm guessing that's coming from the $50,000 grant revenue Cochran Park line.
Right, so that is the grant that we received. It's just being accounted for out of reserves.
Right.
But
'Cause
so
it's
did we
not-
not budget to receive that grant? Like, are we not offsetting general fund or park SDC with the revenue from that grant?
I think if we look at last year's CIP, which I don't have in front of me, the entire park project was coming out of reserve.
Right.
And what we just said, it's a new park, it should be coming out of SDC as much as possible, but we're not gonna put a $50,000 grant into the SDC and then pay it out there. We're gonna put the 50,000, recognize it, and pull it out of the reserve. So we're taking the total 280,
Right. But how much?
$282,000 project, 50 of it's coming from the grant out of reserve and the rest coming out of SDCs.
But how much were we planning to take out of reserve before we moved it over to SDC in last year? Like,
All of it, 280, the 282,706.
and so then if that's what we were planning to do, then why is the 22, 23 project cost 248, not 283?
Right, that's the number I think is incorrect. It's the
Okay.
248.
Okay.
That's what I'm suggesting that we correct.
Okay.
So you think it should be 263,494?
Well, shouldn't it still be 283? Because then if you just subtract everything from,
Yeah, I think to be consistent with what we're doing throughout the document, we're looking at 22, 23 on the accounting side, which I get where Mike's coming from. But I think what's most helpful on the CIP is to have a total project cost there.
Yes.
yeah,
And then we talked about adding a different column, and again, I think we're just on the gun, but if we add a separate column, say what was spent in 22, 23, and then what's projected to be spent still, I think we're just missing a column there that you're doing in your head, and the rest of us aren't getting it aren't doing it in the head, so.
I guess it is, because then that also keeps it consistent with the vehicle and rolling equipment and facility improvement, where we have the estimated future cost, where it's just sort of the total, like we're not spending $10,000 on a car this year and $10,000 on a car next year. We're spending $20,000 on a car.
So we'll modify it to change the 249,100 to 282,706.
Yep.
Okay. Yes.
hello. I was wondering if when we added the accessible playground equipment, if that's what made a difference in the budgeting process. I don't remember. And I talked to some community members recently, and they were very concerned about the Veterans Day. And I know this may not be the place, but Philomath 2000, which became Philomath Community Foundation, set aside, I believe it was $2,000 for a veterans memorial. And some of the people actively involved in that said they wanted to see that used. I realize it's a drop in the bucket for what we are talking about, but as long as they said they want it done for a veterans memorial, that we should perhaps, and I checked with Plymouth Community Foundation, and it's still sitting there. It has been there for a long time. So just throwing that out.
Yeah, I don't know who's overseeing that. If it's just money at the Plymouth Community Foundation, then we could make a request for the $2,000 to go towards the park. I'd be happy to send that letter.
And the people that started it said, as long as it's a veterans memorial, they don't want it they don't want it to go to playground equipment, but they want it to be the memorial part.
Yeah, I'll look into that. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, Teresa.
With the timing, the timing for the construction of the sports park. I think maybe the lighting, pedestrian lighting and the sports park maybe should coincide in that instead of being in 2 different years. In that, if I'm understanding correctly, the sports park will be at the city park. Having additional lighting there would be beneficial is there a reason why it's the next year instead of having it coincide with the construction so that all in one is done?
So one of the things the feasibility study is going to look at is the location of the sports park.
Okay.
So it's not been determined that it will be there or not yet.
Okay.
So until we decide that, then, and this lighting project isn't about lighting up the whole park. It's really about the parking lot area.
Right. Okay.
That's really more used when the Kugler shelter is reserved.
Okay.
And if it's reserved in the winter, anytime past 4:30, 5 o'clock, it's dark in that parking lot. So it's really about lighting up the parking lot area, not so much the play area.
Okay.
I think if we were to have the conversation about lighting of the sports park, it'd be a different conversation to be included with that expense.
All right.
We do that as part of the project cost.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying.
This the pedestrian scale lighting, and the reason it's on the target here is we're looking at repurpose some of the lights on Main
Right.
Street and convert them to LEDs and go that route. So there's a cost associated with the conversion, and we're hoping that's a project that we can do internally in-house.
Thank you.
Any other questions on parks? Bike and footpath. Moving on to the facility improvement schedule. Do I have any questions here? No. Okay. Then the vehicle and rolling equipment replacement schedule. I wonder if we should have a footnote here that indicating that the strategic plan suggests, or perhaps including a line item for charging stations somewhere. Or indicate that the strategic plan includes a consideration of electrification.
Yeah, so maybe I took the liberty, I put that as a project we could take on next year, not this year. In the strategic plan, at least that's what I penciled in, but unless I'm told otherwise, I don't think we have the capacity to do one more thing, unless we can do a collaboration with the grant we're already doing. But otherwise, I figured that would be a big project to look at for next year.
Okay.
I didn't say that when I wrote my note down, but
You were reading that extra column that the rest of us can't see?
yes. Nobody specified date, so I took some liberty. It said not this year.
And the last page of the vehicle and rolling equipment.
I guess I'm trying to make sure I understand the like the nomenclature where we have like the thing that's to be replaced and then we have the replacement. So does that mean we've already replaced it? Or like do we have John Deere tractor and John Deere tractor replacement? Even though we aren't supposed to replace it until this next fiscal year. So
When I asked about this at the meeting, I was told that the legal numbers for public works are retired.
right,
And
but
they
like,
get a new number, but in the police vehicles, the same number is retained. So I think that's why there is a separate entry for a replacement.
It doesn't matter. So if you're looking at the last page 10 of 10, that John Deere tractor. So we want $38,000 to purchase that. We have 28 now. So we're going to pull another 4,000 this year. And this year, next year, as soon as we purchase it, when we get out 2 years, we're going to put another $4,000 towards replacing that new one that we just bought. So we're always going to have a $4,000 a year payment.
see.
It's just
Okay.
that it's going towards the replacement of the one we just bought.
okay, so this is just sort of, okay,
And since we don't have a number for that new John Deere yet, we just call it John Deere tractor replacement.
So it's just showing the rolling.
Right.
okay,
Once we purchase it, we'll put a number by that rolling stock and then it'll track there. But again, we want to look out 3, 4, 5 years from now. What are we going to need to put aside towards the replacement of that tractor that we're purchasing in 2 years? Right. So
and then what is the park equipment?
it's mostly playground type stuff. So as our playgrounds get outdated and old and broke, then we have to replace them.
So why is that in vehicle and rolling equipment as opposed to?
It's park department.
Okay,
But that's a fair point. It's a little bit odd to be there.
right, like as opposed to the park.
So maybe that's a different spot. I might have misspoke. That may be, I don't know, that may be something else they're using for parks. Might be I think the mower there. Kevin, are you still on there?
Yep, it's for the playground equipment. I don't know why it was put there, but that's where our previous finance director felt it was either easier to track or easier to accommodate in that spot.
Okay.
And does that show a $24,000 expenditure coming up in the 23-20? Is that what I'm reading? That there's an
That's a
expenditure coming?
reserve. We're setting money aside, the 24,000.
300, we're setting that aside then,
Next year.
not, okay.
But it says we're also supposed to replace it this fiscal year.
Yeah, that's why I was confused too.
So there's 150,000 expenditure this year, right?
That's not the expenditure, that's the total amount that we want to have when it's time to purchase.
Right, but I'm saying it says it's time to purchase in 23-24, which is what we're approving right now.
Right.
Right.
So,
So I think yes, so we're putting aside $24,000 to add to our $95,000 that we've already put aside, and we're putting it aside for this upcoming fiscal year.
But we don't have enough to meet the 150.
That's a valid point.
Does that need to go out a year further?
I think there's a 24,000 from this year that is,
Probably not been rolled into
has
it
not
yet.
been rolled in.
Oh,
That's the way I was reading it.
Yeah.
So we're gonna add almost 50,000 to that 98.
Right.
Okay.
kind of like my household budget.
Spend a lot of money on park equipment at your
I do.
house.
And play equipment, man.
And I do know that it wasn't, when I came on, we weren't putting money aside for park equipment. That was something new that started, and I'm not the impetus of it, or not that, I didn't initiate it, but
Yeah,
what we were hearing from Kevin and from Gary is this play equipment breaks or it gets outdated, gets worn through, and we don't have a place to
Right.
go to get that additional money. I think this was just an easy place to put it in with the equipment, the other things that we were buying, so that we could be, have some source and some accounting for saving up ahead of time to purchase that equipment, because it does wear out and it gets dated. Look at City Park, some of that equipment's pretty old, pretty dated.
Really dated.
Still fun to play on, but maybe not as safe as what it could be. And
That's the tricky part. Jim's like, shh.
don't chew on the paint, and
So I do have a question though. After I just said that, so I'm looking at on page 10 of 10, the 2019 Dodge Charger, vehicle number 57, says it needs to be replaced in 2 years, and it shows 2 years of contributing 18,000 for it. But if we go up and look at the John Deere tractor in the park department, it also says it's 2 years from replacement, but it only shows one more contribution before it gets replaced, similar to the park equipment. Says it needs it in 2 years, but only shows one more year before it gets replaced. And then on page 9 in the street fund, we have the dump truck that also says it needs to be replaced in 2 years, but only has one more contribution in it. So there's not consistency there. I don't know if that's because the police department does it different than the other departments or something.
I know the dump truck got bumped up a year. That was one where we thought could make it go a couple more. And I think what we heard from Kevin was it needed to go sooner than later.
Mm-hmm.
So that one, we maybe didn't adjust the schedule going out, but the years going out, but the contributions we've moved over. Some of these we aim a little bit higher too on the actual cost. And when it gets time to start really looking at the price, we find something that's less than what's there. So rather than wait the full 2 years and both contributions, we can get it this year when we need it, and we can get it for a little bit less money than what we thought it was going to be. I'm pretty sure that's the case on the dump truck. Kevin, am I wrong there for that 2-yard dump truck?
2-yard dump truck, if you look, the allocate or the fund balance is higher than what's projected. The dump truck's been ordered through the state bid, and we do not have any definite answer as to whether or not we're even going to get it. They're not guaranteeing vehicles to us anymore like they used to. They have our order. It hasn't been rejected. We're kind of holding hope that it shows up. So that's why they're both still in that area.
So I guess that leads to the question then, if theoretically we're already ordered it, do we need to make the $7,200 contribution next year towards that purchase?
Probably not. We'll put it towards the replacement instead.
Mike, do you agree that some of these totals should be revised too?
I talked to Kevin and Gary. The job this year was to get the balances perfect. Next year, we'll get into the details.
Okay.
Yeah, the balances are correct in that one column. And Gary and Kevin and I are going to work next year on individual pieces and get all the new balances and do the new projections.
Okay.
Right now, we're, like I said, the project this year, or the goal this year was to get the balances. The Public Works Committee wanted that last year, or the Finance Committee, I can't remember who. And so that's what we did. Next year, we'll get into the details.
Okay. With respect to the park equipment, Kevin, if you're still there, this might be a question for you, because it would seem like you might have expenditures each year rather than 150,000 every 6 years or so.
That's paid out of my park operating fund, the actual park. What is it, Mike? The park, our line item working section.
Yeah, he pays it out of his operating expense.
The operating, day-to-day operation stuff.
Okay.
That's the park equipment's for buying new equipment to replace old, worn out, no longer functioning, no parts available type equipment.
Okay. So do you make that expenditure periodically, or do you make that every 6 years? And then,
We haven't, the only park equipment we purchased has been many years ago. Well, I mean, other than Flossie Oberman, the new parks, but any replacement was East Newton Creek Park. We put a couple of units in there many years ago. And we've just been saving to replace some of it in City Park.
okay,
Like I said, we've not replaced, taken the swing set out and put a new swing set in. We've not really done that in the
But we did
past.
put that new baby parent swing thing in.
Yeah, that was
City
just
Park.
operating. That was a couple
That was-
$100.
oh, okay.
The equipment we're talking
Let's
about
do that
is-
some more.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, we're talking about, the new, for example, like the swings that used to be in the Shelter 2 playground area. A lot of that equipment is just outdated. It's old. It's not very
Safe.
family friendly. The swings crashed into each other. So, and they were rotted, so they got removed. Well, we've not had money to buy a new swing set for that area, right? This is where that'd be. And a new swing set's going to run between $20,000 to $60,000, depending on the swing set and the size and how many baby swings and all that. So they're pretty expensive. We've just not had we've not had a funding source to buy new equipment for the city parks in the past.
okay. Any other equipment? I might suggest that you modify the heading to include playground equipment in addition to rolling stock. Rolling equipment. Any other comments or questions? All right. Could I have a motion to approve the fiscal year 2023-24 capital improvement plan as presented?
Do you want it as amended?
Oh, I'm sorry.
We've had a lot of discussions. We want it tentative and have them come back with those. It's a plan. It's not a budget or a final. So maybe as amended and you're good with it?
I might like to see it one more time, but I'm just one of 6.
Can we approve it with the final budget, or do you need approval tonight?
We could do that if you want to think. What do you think, Chris?
You're the one building the budget, so
Yeah,
when do you need the numbers?
How hard is it to build the budget if you don't have the capital improvement plan component nailed down? Is that
Not that hard, no.
Okay.
I mean, we've got 90% of it set. And give us that extra time to get in there and look at more numbers and spend more time on it. We can move forward and amend it and then bring it back to council as part of our budget committee. What would the council like? You want to see it before the budget committee, or you want to see it as the budget committee?
If we have time before the budget committee, that might be best, since we asked all the questions.
We brought it back at the April meeting. That's still going to be before the budget committee meets.
Okay, let's do
fine.
that.
Yeah.
So, and again, Mike can run the numbers and really input, again, 95% of the numbers that are in here are going to transfer to the budget. So I don't know we need to delay anything, but we'll bring it back to you and polish it up a little bit.
Okay, do you want a motion tonight or no?
No, we'll just bring it back in April.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Alrighty. And our next item of business is the land acquisition approval.
Great. So city has an opportunity to buy a piece of property at 1917 Main Street. We're using the city attorney as our escrow, quote unquote. So they've received instructions that upon receipt of a warranty deed made out to the city and receipt of a check made out to the current owners of the property, that they'll do the transaction and give each party what is duly theirs. So that's been set up, small recording fee that was added in, which is fine onto the total price of the property. So 337,500 for the property, and then 5650 for the recording fees. There's still a discussion about what specifically the property can be used for. I think that needs to be on an agenda in the near future. I'm not a big advocate of the city being landlords that just sit on top of property and wait for them to increase in value. So I think we need to do a serious look at the property and make some determinations on what to do. There's some, I think, some good way markers within the strategic plan of things the council is interested in doing. So I guess I'm looking at maybe I don't want to overburden, but I'm thinking maybe a work session in conjunction with next month's meeting that we can look at this property and maybe come with some ideas of things to do. That's not part of this, but with acceptance of and the direction to move forward with the purchase of the property, I do think it's something we want to put high up on the priority list for the council to make a determination about.
Chris, because we're on the record here, do you want to say how large the property is too? Just the recording captures it.
Sure. What details do you have, Jim? Because I only brought my packet and I didn't bring all the details, but I can pull it up. 0.51 acres, located at 1917 Main
Plot
Street.
number 4897.
I don't know that one.
Do you have it?
I don't, though. I think
Oh, that's adequate. Okay. Question, yes.
Which part of the budget is this money coming from?
So this is going to come out of the reserve. You'll see it as we'll need to amend the budget. So that'll be forthcoming. So it'll be a amendment. It'll be reserve funds, and it'll come right out of the money that we set aside as reserves. It'll be purchased, put towards this. So it'll actually transfer into land building equipment first, then it'll come out of land building equipment for land acquisition.
And what do we currently have? And like, at what percentage of our reserves is this?
Maybe about 1%.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Good question.
I will just note, again, this is something that became available to city. It wasn't something that we were planning to purchase. We weren't looking to purchase, but we were approached by the landowner that thought the city might have an interest, and talking with the city council indicated there was an interest, and so staff pursued this and worked with the property owner and the city attorney to bring this to you. So I do think it's important to note this wasn't property we were looking for, but there's enough good potential uses of this that the council gave direction to pursue it, even without an exact idea what to do, knowing that there's several good possibilities and it's got good potential. It's a great location. And it's got the added bonus that now the city council has a little bit of control over what goes in there and also what doesn't go in there, right? And I think that's a big concern for me, at least on Main Street, is all these properties that are coming open right now. And, you know, we really don't have any control what's going to go there. And while we're working on some rezoning and some different allowed uses within those zones, it was just, again, an opportunistic time for the city to purchase this property.
Yes.
I move to approve the purchase of the real property at 1917 Main Street.
Do I have a second? Second, thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion as stated, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Motion approved unanimously. With that, I'd like to suggest we take a 5-minute break and reconvene at a 6-minute break and reconvene at 9 o'clock.
Great.
Thank you. All right, the next item on our agenda is ordinance number 874.
We were going to add agenda item E4.
Oh, I'm sorry, just jumped right into F.
Sorry.
I was all ready for it. Okay.
Mentally prepared and everything, right?
Okay. Funding the Memorial Day event, item E4, and you'll recall this discussion came up at our last meeting, but was not addressed before the mayor during the meeting. So perhaps I will let Mr. Berman speak to this one.
Yeah, if Mayor Jones were here, he'd speak to it. Again, he spoke about this during the discussion of the strategic plan. When we got down to specifics, we agreed it'd be better just to bring it up at the end of the meeting after we got done talking the strategic plan. And then, as Councilor Causey said, but didn't happen. He asked me on Thursday, when he recognized that we hadn't got it in the agenda this month, to put something together. I was out ill on Friday, so you got it today. So apologies for the timeliness of it, but that was the reasoning there. The number the mayor's been using is up to $6,000. Talking with Mike today, I only see two areas where that could come from. There's some money in the city council department budget. That money is currently earmarked for training, which has its pros and cons on whether to use that for this or not, but that's a source of revenue that's within the city council discretion, if you will. The other would be the funds that were given to the city through ARPA. Those funds were earmarked for a community-facing project, which you could make an argument that this would be community-facing. I think at the time the thought was it'd be some type of a infrastructure something, but again, it kind of fits there, but that is money that's in the budget currently allocated that could be utilized if that's what the council wants to do. I added a couple bits in there just about, again, kind of came up in the strategic plan. The city doesn't currently spend a lot of money on events. We are very fortunate to live in a community that has a lot of organizations that do events for the community without the city having to itself sponsor anything or provide or put time and energy into it. I mentioned the Frolic and Rodeo is probably the biggest event that the city participates in, and that's with preparation and cleanup from the parade, helping staff the parade with police officers and reserve officers. So there's definitely some staffing expense there with the parade. We do have our officers patrol in the evening at the parade, but it's not outside of kind of normal shift type stuff. They do go in pairs. So there's a little bit there. Most of the other events that are done throughout the city are, again, put on by other organizations, and the city doesn't have a lot of financial or otherwise contributions to it. So you can make an argument, say that's a good thing. Looking at the city's mission statement, responsible municipal government provides citizenry with high quality municipal services, efficient, cost-effective manner. Not doing a lot of event type stuff definitely fits within that. But then there's the counter argument, which is, the city's not going to hold a Memorial Day celebration. Who is? And if nobody's going to, is that in the best interest of our citizenry? Or should we be hosting something? My recommendation, if we end up using either of these funds, either way, I think there's still a continued discussion about if we do it this year, we're going to continue to do it next year. We can't use ARPA funds every year indefinitely, right? So we need to find a funding source for this, another partner for this, or look to another organization to put this event on. So try to do Mayor Jones justice. If he's listening to this, hopefully I've done that. But happy to try to answer any questions you might have for him or me.
I don't know if you can answer this, but I guess just sort of the breakdown of where that 6,000 went. I know we all have different perspectives, but I guess my perspective is just coming from like doing student government at the high school. We would put on a lot of large events that would attract a lot of people, and our budget for the year was like 10,000. So 6,000 for one event does feel a little steep, especially when there's also donated things, and there's private donations from, local businesses and everything. And I guess my other concern is just, and I've said this previously, I would like us to have a broader discussion about city support for events and community building, rather than just this one event, because plopping down $6,000 on this one event, why didn't we put money towards blank or blank or blank? And I would like us to have sort of a policy, not just because it's something the mayor wants to do. Nothing against the mayor, but just, there's lots of other events and organizations and individuals that I think would like city funding for their things. So I guess those are kind of my two questions of like, where is this 6,000 going? Is there any way to bring down that cost by having more private fundraising and donations, or even in-kind donations? And then at a broader scale, I just have concerns with the precedent, I guess, without having a policy that goes along with the precedent.
Yeah. I think my best response is going to be, I think the majority of the expense last year was in the band itself and then equipment. Some promotional items, so some posters were done up. That was an expense as well. But I'm not sure of the breakdown of the 6,000, and I'm not familiar with the budget from last year on what was spent. So I'll have good answers for that. I do know that like the canopy got donated from the Frolic, the food vendors and things. I don't think they collected money for them to be there, and I don't think they charged for them to be there. I think they were just invited to come.
Right.
That's all
I
right.
handled the food carts last
Did you?
year. Yeah, and that was just an invitation to come, and then allowing the city to allow the utilities to be run through having that available.
Yeah, so no, that's the most insight I have on the budget.
Yeah, I guess just it feels like we could probably significantly decrease the cost by picking a less expensive act.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, I don't know, I didn't get the sense that most people came to the event specifically for that band. They came to the event because they like having a cool event
I
downtown.
think you're wrong on that.
What?
I think there is a percentage of people that just came to see that band.
I agree. I think there's a percentage, but is it a $4,000 worth percentage? I don't know.
I have no
Just while we're on the dollar number amount, I see the hand, but just in perspective, for what it's worth, for Music in the Park, we have bands come for that, and they budget at $200 per band for a 2-hour set. It usually ends up being about an hour and a half, like 2 45-minute sets, because most kind of start going off. But for essentially 2-hour set, about $200. And I believe they had 18 bands that applied this year, and they had to narrow that down to the 8 or so that they do. So at that $200 range, there was a plethora of different acts and bands and stuff to choose from, just for perspective.
Councilor Clark.
I have two questions. The first one is the training money for $6,500. Is that the inclusivity training budget money?
It's all training, but it includes, I think the intent was that we were going to do some city council inclusivity training. Yes.
Okay. And then the second question is, I wasn't there and I will be traveling again this year, but it's Memorial Day. Are they truly honoring veterans? Are they, I heard the Star Spangled Banner, I heard a few things, but how in depth was that?
Do you want to speak to the memorial?
It was fairly in depth. I actually wasn't there for the entire presentation, but Eric Neiman organized a presentation, and 4 of the 5 of the counselors presented something about each of 5 different veterans. So there really was a ceremony honoring the veterans first before the band went on.
And then I would propose that Fran Girding might be the one, or one of the ones to honor if we do it this year, because Memorial Day is, as you probably know, for those who have died and not for the ones that are still living. But Veterans Day is for the ones that are still living. So
yes,
no pushback from the community on that.
I had a question about the liability issues with this direct city sponsorship versus like last year, there were vendors there that were selling alcohol in particular. Now I know the city didn't sponsor that, so I'm assuming the city didn't really have any added liability for that. And I know that the Frolic, which the city also doesn't sponsor, but is some, much more closely affiliated, does sell alcohol. And I was just wondering if we could have a discussion about what the liability potentially could be if something bad happens.
Sure. If it's a city-sponsored event, then typically what we would want to do is have a conversation with our insurer about what the insurance requirements would be, not for the city, but for the other sponsors, the vendors, those kinds of things at the event. And then what you would do is require them to have the necessary insurance. If there is alcohol being sold, then there's a whole series of different things, making sure that the people who are selling alcohol have the appropriate licensure and they have the appropriate insurance, and they know how to not sell to minors, each of those things.
And just going off the assumption that the vendor has a liquor license to begin with, so they're understanding what all those things are. I didn't know if there's any added liability because we put our name on it.
Well, you end up with more, the way that a fire marshal described it to me is that when you add alcohol into congregate groups of people, you simply have more risk, and you're going to, it is much more likely you're gonna have bad behavior, and so you have to plan for those things.
But the city is really not exposed any more than.
Well, when you know that there is a risk, then you need to walk through the steps to address those risks, which is making sure other people have appropriate licensure, that they have insurance, that they indemnify and make the city harmless, those kinds of things. So yeah, there's more risk, but there are ways to address it. Whether that works with the other co-sponsors is kind of a different question.
From my perspective, there are enough questions swirling around this issue that I think it warrants a broader discussion. A couple of thoughts come to mind. If someone is really coming to see a specific band because they really like that band, maybe they should be charged admission to pay for that band, particularly if it's an expense of that magnitude. It seems inappropriate to, on one hand, raise our utility rates and then turn around and fork out $6,000 for a party, even if the two are not related. And finally, the ask for, you mentioned the inclusivity training that's been out there since the death of George Floyd, which is several years ago now. And I think it would still be worthwhile to have that training. So if we could, I'd like to suggest we table these issues for a work session where we can have a more general discussion, and perhaps the mayor will even join us.
The mayor's urgency on this is that Memorial Day is in May and we're already to March. I think that's part of the concern is if we're not going to fund it, then we're not going to fund it and he'll stop planning. If we're going to fund it, then he would continue, and we recommend we get an ad hoc committee going, get a chairperson and start promoting it. So I think that's why he wanted it on the agenda tonight, was to get some direction. If there's enough concerns and enough unknowns there that we're just going to say that we're just not going to fund it, then, and we can look to maybe fund it in the future, do something similar in the future, have a more in-depth discussion about it. I think that's fine. I think he was looking for a quick, is this something we want to do? Last year was great. Do we want to do it again? Can we get the money up to a certain amount, and can we move forward? But if, again, there's questions enough there, then that's the direction council needs to go. We just need to give that direction.
Yes, Councilman.
I hear that. I guess just quite frankly, it's a little hard to do this without him here, since this is 100% his thing. I feel like that would be like me making an agenda item and then not being at the meeting and you all having to figure out what I meant by it. And I know things, you know, we all have jobs and stuff, so that's not a judgment. It's just I genuinely don't really know how to proceed on his passion project without him here. And just, I mean, because there's a lot of unanswered questions, I guess. Like I would be more comfortable with it not being a city event, but a private event that maybe the city can support, including financially. Just because, as you've said, this events is not something the city of Philomath has ever done before. I'm not saying I don't think it ever should be something we do, but I'm not ready to just start like a Parks and Rec department tonight, you know, like start the precedent of the city planning community gatherings all on our own just for this one thing tonight without sort of a broader discussion of like, so is the city council planning it, or is Chelsea helping with that? Is, you know, like how is sort of, what is staff doing? What are councilors doing? What is the mayor doing? What is Joanna Carson, former Mayor Neiman, Councilor Nielsen, Philomath Frolic and Rodeo Brewery and others doing? It's just, I don't know how to answer this question without answers to all of those questions, I think is my problem. And I understand the urgency, but also there's, I mean, and again, I feel like I'm coming across like a little bit of a mean person, but I didn't use other words that I could have used. But I just like, I understand it's March and this is happening in May. He has been the mayor since the beginning of this council as well. And I just, this could have been introduced in January if that was the concern. So I guess I don't really want that put on us of like, oh no, the council ruined it by not approving it in time when this is the first time we're seeing it. But yeah.
Okay, I think yes, Diane.
I've been involved in the memorial ceremonies in Corvallis, and I believe it's done basically for free. It's a lot of volunteers but it's just focused on memorial. This is also like a block party, and that's a different thing altogether, and maybe that's what's bringing our cost. So I love the idea of a memorial ceremony in our city, and that our city could support that. I also love the idea of bringing our city together in a block party, I'm just saying those are two different things. Calling it a memorial celebration, I know that we could do that for free, so.
I keep talking, can I say one more thing?
Yes.
I think just to your point too, it talks about bringing numerous attendees from afar and then lists a bunch of other cities. That's great. I don't really want to spend our taxpayers' money on them. I think just to your point of charging, and like, I think my point is sort of with, I think Philomath people would show up to an event even without that band. Maybe not 100% of the people that did, but I feel like, yes, you're probably right. A decent chunk of the out-of-town people probably showed up for that band. I don't want to spend our money providing a free concert for people from out of town necessarily. And how many of the food trucks were Philomath vendors versus people from Corvallis and Albany?
Lebanon and Albany.
Right. So
I didn't have any. We have food vendors in Philomath.
Well, no, just that's kind of my point. So we spent our taxpayer money bringing in people from out of town to spend money on businesses from out of town.
There was no cost.
Yeah, we didn't.
No, but I'm saying this, if we sponsored this event this year, we would be spending our taxpayer money bringing in people from out of town to spend money on businesses from out of town and then leave. And I guess I don't necessarily see the return on investment for that compared to spending less money on an event that would still bring people from Philomath to a Philomath event. I'm going to stop talking now.
Okay. Go ahead.
It seems to me that there are enough concerns that I don't think we're going to be funding this event this year. So I move that we move on to the next topic.
Okay, I like that motion.
I have not spoken on this topic, and I do, after receiving the letter about the U.S. combat troops from Vietnam, the people that gave their lives from Philomath, and honoring them in the Recognition Act of 2017, and the fact that I do believe there is value in Memorial Day celebration. in my heart of hearts, I believe that. And I think there are community members that also would feel the same. I've attended a lot of events, Memorial Day events, at our schools, in our communities, maybe not in Philomath so much, but I do think an event like this has merit. Whether it merits city funds of $6,000, that I'm not so sure. Does it have, is there value in having people outside of Philomath come to Philomath for an event in regards to getting them maybe to return for other events in Philomath tourism or business, benefiting our businesses that are in Philomath? That's a consideration for me as well. But I do think there is purpose as a retired educator in that ability to connect face-to-face personal relationships in our community and having events, whether it's this or others, that discussion of what types of events we're going to have in our community. I think there is value in that. There is value in relationships. There's value in the culture of gathering to celebrate, whatever it may be. So I don't think we can put aside, it has no value. I think we should, I mean, it does seem last minute, and the $6,000 to me seems like a lot. And I think we could do better with band costs, but I know my participation then in having the food trucks, I did not know of any food trucks from Philomath.
No, that's fine.
And that should be, I was unable to locate any food trucks from Philomath, which is why we went outside of Philomath for food trucks to come to Philomath, providing a food source during that event. But I don't know, I'm just not quite there to say, let's can it. I think there still is value, and especially in an environment post-COVID and still coming together and learning to celebrate and acknowledge and put forth effort to do something.
Well, a couple of, yes, Councillor.
I agree with everything you just said.
Except
that I think we're not set up to do these types of things, and there's not enough time for us to get ramped into it before this year's Memorial Day weekend. There isn't, from the permitting and all that stuff and coordinating and trying not to put extra burden on the city from a liability standpoint is my biggest concern. I think that the party was awesome. I think the memorial service before the party was awesome. I think all the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive about the event, but it was a passion project, and it maybe was done haphazardly because it was a private event, and you can't do that if you put the city's name on it. So I think that we should consider hosting or sponsoring or supporting community events moving forward, but I don't think we're in a position to do it today.
Would the council consider, I'm pretend I'm the mayor for just a moment, and what you would think with the council, because if in my impression in talking to the mayor about this project is he feels like the planning will go easier this year because he did it last year. And I don't believe he wants to step back from helping plan and coordinate and do a lot of that work, but it was the financial toll that it took on having the band and the insurance requirements and all of that stuff. Would the council consider a contribution towards a Memorial Day event of a lower amount than the $6,000 ask as a way to say, we're in support, we're willing to help financially, but we're not going to fund the whole thing, and we're not going to plan it, we're not going to be liable for it, but we'd be willing to pledge X amount of dollars towards a Memorial Day event?
Jessica.
I would feel comfortable doing that only if we had a policy in place similar to what Councilor McMorrin had suggested before, because there's a Pride event that's going to be happening. There's going to be plenty of other events that come along, and I don't think it sets a good precedent to give any sort of appearance of preferential treatment, especially to someone in power.
Did you have a comment?
A comment and maybe a question. City manager's question was, maybe funded some lesser amount. I was wondering, since the way it's been described as, we had these people who came from other places. I don't know if there's transit lodging tax monies on hand. And so if you have people who are coming from roughly more than 50 miles away, you'd consider it to be assisting tourism under the statute, and it might be eligible for that. I don't know if there's any money on hand. It's just a possibility, and issue. Whether you're thinking about this particular event or a policy on events for the future, that might be one source of money to fund these things. So just
I agree that would be an appropriate source, but I also agree with Councilor Andrade that we need some kind of a policy rather than deciding just to fund this event because the mayor is asking us to. Councilor Bingham.
I did send a sort of very rough draft idea of a policy to Chris a little while ago for my sort of community building fund idea. I don't know if that's something you'd want to share with the council, Chris.
Yeah, I can send it out.
Okay. Because I feel like I've been harsh, so I'd like to soften myself a little bit. Well, no, but just I loved the event last year, and I would like to see it happen again. So I want to make clear that's not where I'm coming from. It's more just and just as Councilor Andrade said, like we have been asked to support other events in the past, and our response has been, sorry, we don't have a way to do that. So I would love to support all of those events, but I would love to support them in a consistent manner, not in a, like, if it's the mayor doing it, it gets funded. If it's someone else doing it, it doesn't get funded. And I guess, just like, so I would be potentially in favor of something like Chris suggested, just because I want to see this happen. But I guess I'm stuck a little bit.
May I suggest that we table this discussion until the 27th? And could we discuss it at that point as a carryover item and perhaps review Councilman Moran's proposal?
I wasn't planning on a city council meeting on the 27th.
Oh, darn it.
Unless we have an item to carry over, but this would be the only item we carry over for a meeting.
Or a policy for events.
I mean, I think I would be willing to do that just because I also would like to have the discussion about that policy prior to our budget year getting started, in case we'd like to put a line item in next year's budget for community building stuff. I'd like the council to reach some consensus on that before we dive too far in. But I mean, I don't know where everyone else is at. I would be happy to come back on the 27th.
Thank you.
That is a date I had penciled for the joint meeting with the school board. So I have that penciled on mine, but
the first hour, and then we can have this discussion a second.
We could.
Yeah,
we could.
Is that policy, may I ask Christopher, is that policy typed up that you would recommend?
Yes, it is. Like, I just typed it up as it was coming out of my brain and sent it to Chris, so I might want to spruce it up. But yeah, it's all typed in. Yeah, oh God, I could do that tonight when I get home. Okay.
Wait, no, maybe no.
All right, do we have a general?
When you get older and they do the time change, that doesn't.
Do we have a general consensus to carry this forward to the 27th?
Could we then see if there's any lodging tax basis to, will we know by then?
$2,500 of transit lodging tax.
Okay.
We received $5,000 from Benton County. Half of it goes towards the grant program, which we divvied out to the Chamber of Commerce and the Frolic and Rodeo. The other $2,500 is for the city to use for tourism-related activities.
Okay, thank you. All right. Our next agenda item is Ordinance 874. And this is a land use ordinance, so once again, I need to ask if there are any conflicts of interest with respect to this ordinance, or any objections. This is not the right place for the ordinance.
Doesn't look like there's anybody who can do that.
Okay, then I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, this is the second reading. This is an ordinance amending the Philomath Comprehensive Plan map and zoning map designation, from medium-density residential to high-density residential for property in the city of Philomath, and modifying ordinance number 720.
Okay,
And you just asked for deliberation, or
is there any discussion, question, comments?
This is exactly the same, right? As, okay.
yes, sir.
And I believe we need a roll call vote.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Diane Crocker,
Yes.
Matt Lehman,
Yes.
Christopher McMorrin,
Yes.
Teresa Nielsen,
Yes.
Jessica Andrade,
No.
Ruth Cozy.
Yes. Thank you. All right, and with that, we have reports of boards, commissions, committees, council liaisons, and staff. Mr. Workman.
Are you still liking the layout of the staff report? Does that work well to give some updates? and-
Yes, it was very helpful.
Okay, appreciate that. My management team appreciates not having to be at the entire meeting, although they happen to be here when something's on the agenda, but otherwise this is working well for them as well. I won't go into these detail by detail, but if you've got any questions about any of these items, I would be happy to try to find the answer for
I
you.
did have a question,
Mhm.
and it was regarding the quote-unquote consulting firm, that HR consulting firm that we hired, and wondering if there's been any change in or an update. I know it says that you're continuing to work with them, but I was wondering if we could get more detail on that.
Chelsea and I met today, and she's reaching out to them to try to wrap that contract up. And we'll provide an update when that's taken place. We believe we've gotten all of the items from them that were in the scope of the agreement, and we'll be discussing the agreement.
Awesome.
Can you tell us what the status of the union negotiations is when those will?
We met with our AFSCME union, which represents employees in public works, last week on Thursday. We're going to meet again middle of April, and we meet with our police group tomorrow afternoon for our first sit down, and anticipate at least 2 meetings with them. So,
Okay, thank you.
I will just note on that, the contract expires technically on the end of April sometime, I think April 23rd or something. If those contracts don't get renewed, they just continue on. Sometimes there's I won't say scare tactic, but I'll say scare tactic of, oh, we're out of we're out of contract, we're out of contract. There's language in the contract that the contract continues until it gets replaced. So the target is to have those ready by the end of April, but reality is it won't come to you for the April meeting. So it'll be hopefully the May meeting is when we'll have those union contracts for you to review.
Yes.
This is like just a sort of technical question, but for the police department, and I don't know if you know the answer. It says we're waiting on the uniform for the code enforcement officer. What uniform does the code enforcement officer wear?
I believe it's khakis and a polo with the city seal on it and maybe a ball cap.
Sure.
Can it be khaki shorts? That'd be awesome.
And then
In the summer, probably. So
I
the
guess
zippers at the knee.
the other question was just about him also being hired as a reserve police officer
Yes.
and just sort of any potential blurred lines between those two. Like, are we very clear about when he's just a code enforcement officer versus when, like, I guess I'm not fully familiar with how our reserve, like, what if he's out enforcing a code enforcement violation and then there's a crime being committed, then does he turn into a police officer or, okay.
No, he's
okay.
When he's a reserve, for the most part, he'll be with another officer.
Okay,
And doing
okay.
other work.
Okay.
It'll be very clear in his timesheet when he's getting
Okay.
paid and when he's a volunteer. And Chief Rubens talked with him on that. Yeah, I don't think we'll have any confusion there.
Okay, just I think part of what I like about the code enforcement officer is that it's not a police officer, so it's a little, a less intimidating face potentially for some of these code violations. I just want to make sure we're keeping it that way.
Yep, that's intent.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if this is a question for you or Councilor Lehman, but the climate-friendly areas public meeting.
Here we go.
What is that?
It's definitely not a question for me.
It's not.
I've been the loudest person talking about the climate-friendly spaces, so. Is it the county or is it Campo? It's Campo.
Campo is assisting.
Yeah, so Campo is helping put together a presentation so that the citizens of Philomath can have a better understanding of what the carbon-friendly spaces thing is moving forward.
Oh, okay.
And they're going to provide us with some samples of what an area would look like and things like that, so we can have a better grasp of what it really means for our city, not just like a city.
And that will be at that public, those samples will be at that meeting, that public meeting that we'll be having.
That's my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
So this is due to new legislation the state passed that required that metropolitan areas, which we get included in because we're part of Campo.
I think it was an executive order. I don't think it was
Is it
legislation.
executive order?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right. Right.
Another one of
So-
my pet peeves.
so-
If you have a super majority in both houses and you still can't pass a law, maybe it's not a good law.
It's targeted at housing. It's targeted at high density housing. It's requiring cities to look at their development within these areas, remove restrictions for development like parking requirements and, maximum number of units per acre type requirements that are in place. Height restrictions currently in place, and essentially allow these areas to be very highly and intensely developed with mixed use, residential and commercial. So there's there'll be some what I consider fairly minor changes in our code. I'll say that at this point that'll be required. There may be some larger changes to the code that may be required as the rules come out. But the rules as we understand them now, there's going to be some differences to height, differences to parking requirements. A lot of it will impact us differently depending on which area we identify. There's no money to fund any development in those areas. There's no money to offset costs or would-be revenues in these areas. It's really just do this in your cities in order to have higher densities and have a lower carbon footprint, lower impact on the environment. So
a really good question is to ask how requirements for the Americans with Disabilities Act plays with the carbon friendly stuff, because not having parking spaces includes not having parking spaces.
Accessible.
Yeah, so it's a challenge, and I think the state's answer has been, well, provide one.
Seems conflicting.
Love the state. Yeah. Geez, those people work for this.
Yeah, God.
The worst.
So to Councilor Neiman's point, so CAMPO, Corvallis Area Metropolitan Organization, they do get some funding to help. They've hired a consultant, 3J Consulting, who's very good, by the way. And so they're helping coordinate these public outreach meetings, creating material to be put on the website, whatnot. So we do have a page on the city's website. If you Google search it, you'll pull it up, and we've got a dedicated page already to climate-friendly areas within Philomath. We've got notes from the first public meeting, which was a joint meeting between Corvallis, Albany, and Philomath. Corvallis and Albany had a second meeting last month, and we're coming on the hill, so we're having our second meeting a week from tomorrow on the 21st. It'll be here. It'll also be virtual, so you can attend either way. There's bilingual assistance, there's childcare assistance. So, with some of that funding from the consultant comes some additional provisions that we don't usually provide and can't usually afford to do. So that's there.
Can I make one more comment on
Yes,
on
of
this?
course.
I've definitely given all of you the impression that I'm totally against this program, and I'm not. And I agree with Chris that there's not going to be significant changes to our code language in order to comply with what the state wants. The biggest issue I have is that first it was by an executive order, so it could be changed in 2 years just with a stroke of a pen. The second thing is that it's one size fits all. So any city over 5,000 population has the same thing implemented. And, we just had another executive order where our county was excluded from funding sources to address homelessness, but we're not excluded from this. It just doesn't make any sense to me at all.
We're working on that one.
Yeah, I know that, but you had to retroactively work on it and legislatively correct what was missed in an executive order, and that's why you don't do executive orders. Anyway, and I just wanted to throw one more log on that fire.
Explain.
Part of what I want to talk about in my council report is the Highway 2034 corridor stuff that's going on there. Part of that discussion, we get our estimates through Portland State University and population and all that good stuff. We're all familiar with that because we have to use them for our housing needs analysis and all that stuff. So PSU is projecting that by 2043, we're going to have a 32% increase in population in the Campo, just in Campo, which is from Adair Village to Philomath. Basically that little crescent there. There's going to be a 36% increase in the number of households, and there's going to be a 15% increase in the number of jobs. And this is known by the state, it's known by the planning organizations, it's known by Campo, it's known by everybody that we're continuing to increase our population, but we're not increasing economic development at all. And we're not going to increase the capacity of any of our road systems. We're just going to convince those extra 21,000 people that they don't ever need to get in a car, is the strategy of the state. Okay. Anyway, back to, I'm sorry, I hijacked that conversation completely, but I do have some things to talk about on the Highway 3024 corridor once we're done with Chris.
I have a question about one of these things. In the last bullet point under administration, you talks about MPC builders. Meet is present tense, as in currently meeting, and established is past tense. So how are things going with that? Are the meetings continuing and continual as far as progressing, or?
Strike 1E.
Okay, thank you, met. Oh, thank you, that's what I needed. Sorry.
Can you tell she was a teacher?
Yeah.
So nothing, no, other than what we have here, that's what we're talking. Are we seeing some?
I'm trying to remember from the last update. I felt it was a productive meeting. I think that developers got a clear path forward. It's not that different than what it looked like 6 months ago or 3 months ago even, but he's I think the city's reiterated the fact that we need to see some compliance. There's still some disagreement about the flood elevation level and the current grading plan. So he's hired a couple of engineers who do some modeling, some floodplain modeling, and see if, if the floodplain is different than what we're seeing, and see if they can come in with a revised elevation plan or a revised grading plan. That option was available to him several months ago, and he submitted a revised grading plan, and the city engineer didn't approve it. So he's looking to do some remodeling and some remodeling, and resubmit that.
I'm worried.
So it looks like that's the route he's going. That may take several weeks, month or two. We did put some pressure to get the lot line adjustments taken care of. I think they felt that pressure. We put some pressure to get the elevation certificate for the one outstanding home on Timothy completed. We did receive that within just a few days of our meeting, and that's been submitted to FEMA, and so they're looking to do the map revisions for that block of homes on North Timothy Street that were out of compliance. So that was a positive that resulted from the meeting. So yeah, we're seeing some, again, I think there's a path forward. I think we did a good job between Jim and city planner and the city engineer, Denny Munchmore. I'll put a shout to him, did a great job of showing the city's position and where we're at and why things need to be done the way that the city's requiring them to be done, and provide some additional, hopefully, understanding there of why we're insisting upon the elevations that we are. So again, I think the city is well represented. You've got great staff, you got great city engineer, great city attorney, and I think the city made it very, very clear of where we're at, what needs to be done. So overall, I think it was a real positive meeting, and I hope that we see continued improvement on the development.
Christopher.
Just, I guess, follow up. I saw that you held sort of a little town hall or whatever.
Neighborhood meeting.
Yeah. I guess, can you just sort of recap the concerns or the sentiments from the residents for that?
I provided an update from the meeting, similar to what I just provided you. Mostly was there to answer questions on specific properties, specific issues, concerns, just answer a lot of questions. Went a little bit longer than I thought it would, about 2.5 hours. But it was good. I just, again, my biggest thing is I think that we've had the need for some better communication, especially with new residents that have come to town. I think that's been a voice that's been a little bit lost with all of the angst of trying to get things corrected, is listening to the neighbors that are there and what their concerns are. So I just wanted to make myself available for that. There's a lot of, expressed a lot of appreciation for me taking the time to do that, and I was happy to do it. So mostly what I'm hearing from them is they just want to see the progress. They just want to have better communication. They want to see things moving forward. What I wasn't expecting to hear from them is a lot of people are just really happy to be in the neighborhood. They're happy to be in Philomath. I heard from 2 people that weren't able to be at the meeting, very positive comments about the neighborhood in general. They love their neighbors. They love Philomath. They think it's a great place. They haven't had trouble with the methane issue. They got notices. They think the consultants are doing a good job of giving them notice before they come. They're showing up when they're supposed to. They're doing the inspections. They're leaving. It was a little bit different take than I think what we're hearing from people that are complaining that are having bad experiences. There are some people in the neighborhood that are having good experiences with the development and are happy to be there, have concerns about the methane, have the kind of normal concerns we're hearing, but I wasn't anticipating hearing those stories, and I heard, several of them. So there's some positives in that neighborhood. I still think it's a potential for a great neighborhood. It's going to be a great spot at some point. We just need to get around this corner, and we're hopeful the developer can still make that happen. So,
thank you. Other questions for Chris? All right, Matt, do you want to talk to?
Thanks. So Chris forwarded it to you. There's like a short slide deck. I know everybody can have a chance to take a look at it, but I just wanted to do a quick summary and just touch on some high points of that. So The biggest real takeaway is that Plymouth Boulevard was identified by Campo as the highest priority corridor for the 2043 Regional Transportation Plan. So that's awesome. That doesn't mean that, next week we're going to be seeing anything happening on the corridor, but at least it's been identified. Most of the issues are going to be related to safety issues, like crossings, intersection operations, things like that, but also trying to improve the flow of traffic without increasing the capacity of the corridor, is the key takeaway. So there may be some like pullouts for transit and things like that, but not actual additional lanes to put more traffic through. Because as I mentioned before, the state is convinced that they'll be able to convince everyone not to drive anymore in the next 2 or 3 years. Talked about the population stuff, and then there's a listing of already identified projects that either from Corvallis or from Philomath or from Campo or from the county, everybody has their own little projects they've identified. The problem is that it's because it's a regional corridor, not one entity has responsibility for it except for ODOT. And they don't have any money to do anything to it. And they're basically having to go out and explore grant opportunities to get things done. So really what the next step forward are identifying small incremental projects and improvements that can be made and made shovel ready so that for the next round of funding, we can apply for grants similar to what happened with our water treatment plant. Like we just happened to be shovel ready. They had a pile of money, voila. The thinking is basically the same concept, different pot of money, but the same concept. We're gonna have a bunch of these projects, small, under 5 million each projects that can get immediate funding if they're ready to go. So that's gonna be kind of the approach that is gonna be going on moving forward. And so there's like 3 pages worth of these little individual projects that are being detailed. But the reason I wanted to bring this up is that this is obviously a biggest pain point for most of the people in Florida, because we all have to get on that road to go to the doctor, to go to the movies, to get groceries, to whatever. And I think there's finally some recognition that that is the case. And also just the very intense nature of the freight going through is going to continue, and trying to accommodate pedestrian crossings on a major freight route is tough, and they're looking at it. So that's mostly what I wanted to give an update on, just let people know that stuff's happening.
Is this captured in their strategic plan?
It's in the Regional Transportation Plan it's the 2043 Regional Transportation Plan, yes.
Okay.
It has also been identified by ODOT to do some preliminary planning and studies. So they've actually set aside some money to do like traffic studies and other things like that. And they've already done some even planning and engineering work on some of the 20 or 30 small projects that are out there. But again, it's not a let's see what's happening from the west edge of town until you get to Lynn County or anything like that. One other development too is that Albany, AMPO, the Albany Area Planning Organization, and Campo have both dedicated resources to study the corridor from Albany to Philomath. So it incorporates portions of that. That is also a 20 years out study, though it's not, no one's gonna put anything on the ground in that corridor unless a miracle happens in the next 5 to 10 years, other than incremental improvement things, and most likely looking at 2043 before anything substantial might happen there.
And that was, may I ask a question? That's basically the Highway 20, is that what you're talking about when you talk about the corridor from Corvallis to Albany? Are you talking about 20?
Primarily. So, there's a lot of work going on there
Right,
now.
Yeah.
right.
Right. And so the idea is to to see what the impacts of that are and what other impacts can be made along that full corridor there. Now, the Highway 34 part comes in
Correct.
also, but I don't believe that's part of the study between the two groups. It's mostly focused on 20.
Thank you.
Do you want to throw anything in there?
Just, we've been petitioning for quite a while to be added to the Highway 20 study, to not end at Corvallis, but to bring that all the way through to Philomath. And we've been making that argument for 8 or 9 years now, and we're finally getting acknowledged that map's getting acknowledged. When they're talking about a Highway 20 study, it's not ending in Corvallis, it's coming all the way through the county to Philomath, which is a new shift and a good one. So.
And just also something I got at the Campo that doesn't have anything to do with that project, but they are seriously looking at now 53rd Street and the opportunities to fund creating the overpass that has been talked about for 20 years or so. So that is also kind of bubbling up now as well. So
An overpass at 20?
no, an overpass over the railroad tracks.
Oh, that one.
Yeah.
And then the road,
It was closed today, by the way.
then the road potentially widening there also. That's because 53rd Street is like an arterial. It's not a collector, right? It's an arterial. And so it's supposed to be able to handle a lot more traffic than it currently does. And one of the ways to do that is to create this overpass over the railroad instead of trying to funnel everything into that minuscule little trestle that they have there. And we all know
The pond.
The pond.
the pond.
That's right.
And working with railroad companies is nigh on to impossible. So I think the best plan is just to go over their heads and literally to go over their heads. Anyway.
And that would be the county doing that, or?
It's a county road.
Right.
Technically, but I think Campo is involved in the planning process for that as well.
Okay.
And that's part of the reason why it's bubbling up, is that those infrastructure dollars are becoming available. And so I think someone sees an opportunity, again, if you have a plan that's already designed and ready to go, and you can say, oh, for $15 million, we can do this awesome road project and it's ready to go, that they might get the money.
Councilor Nielsen, do you want to talk about your outreach to
Philomath Community Services?
No.
Oh, help me here.
The grocery store out.
Where
Waremark. Well, I guess I could. I was going to do PCS, but I was on PCS mindset. I really would like all of us would really like a grocery store in Philomath. And I've been putting out feelers, and there's just not a lot of interest because of the size and property. And then Christopher mentioned, I was unaware that Winco had started a new branch, which is this Waremart, which are smaller types of Winco markets. It's all under the umbrella of Winco, but they're smaller markets. It's self-contained like a Winco, but just a smaller gauge. And I went online today and I sent out a informative request on their contact. And I gave them some information about traffic and population growth, and just a lot of this various information I gathered as a city council, not public information, nothing private, but that I gathered along the way. And I sent it with this interest in a new store for Philomath. And talked about future growth and some things that we were prospective growth and cities and a corridor and everything. Well, I got a text email back this evening from Winco saying that we are not immediately on the list of, I should probably get that
targeted
communities. But she thought the information that was provided was informative, and she was going to, that it seemed like a possible candidate that, if I can find that real quick. Although we don't have a store scheduled for Philomath yet, I will gladly forward your suggestion and all the information provided to the Vice President of Real Estate for consideration. We hope to have the honor of opening one of our stores closer to you in the near future. For more information, you may contact Winco Foods. And then I went onto social media thanks to Counselor Crocker, and I asked if, would it be okay if I put something on social media I'm not a big Facebook person, to encourage other people, because I figured if the more of us that are making comments to Winco saying we really would like to have a store in our community, sometimes those things have a difference, make a difference. Years ago, I was on another type of project, and the lady there, it was a large company. What was the company then? Was it Disney or someone? It was a large corporation. And they said they counted every email as 5,000 citizens.
Oh, yes.
Or they said they equated,
We're done.
yeah, that's right.
You already covered us.
No. But if that's the case, if they really do put more credence in each contact that a person makes, perhaps if we get citizens from our community contacting winco.com, there's a really easy contact us thing, and it's all online, and you just kind of explain your purpose for wanting a store in your area. Maybe we have a chance of possibly getting a store near us, which I think would be pretty fantastic. So I'm just urging everyone who I know that lives in this area to go on the winco.com website. It's a contact us link, and you just go down and it's a drop down, fill out the block. Took me longer because I had to give you information, but it took the average person probably 5 minutes to do, maybe at the most.
Can I ask who else you've reached out to? You said you'd sent out some feelers.
Oh, I'm just talking to neighbors.
Oh, okay.
As far as what type of businesses they would like to see in Philomath with street kids coming along. I think I would like to see our jobs and businesses developing. So I've been talking to neighbors and community members. I volunteer a bit in various organizations, and while I'm there, I talk to them about, what would you like to see? What type of businesses would you like to see come to Philomath? What are your interests? And a good portion of those individuals, first thing they would like is a grocery store. Could we please have a grocery store? So
Okay.
And it
that's
would help
that.
get cars off of Philomath Boulevard between here and Corvallis.
See?
Yes.
Exactly.
Now we're talking.
Yes. So that was that. And I'm still hoping that maybe all of us and whoever you talk to, please, I don't think it would hurt to have a flood of people interested in having a store here contact Winco. And it's not the only one, but I think it's an option for us. So,
100%.
And I
yes.
still think if we can get that link
Yes.
with someone smarter than me about adding that, people would
Just link and go.
readily
Yes. So
click it and go.
okay. It's easy squeezy. Now can I have about PCS?
Yes, you
Okay, thank you. Philomath Community Services is looking upon expanding and acquiring property, most likely to build or convert existing property. They need more space, substantially, and so Mark has compiled a survey that he would like to have us put out for our city to have, he's already done the city amongst the PCS members, but he would like a survey amongst the community to see what are the community needs, what do the community members view as what they would like to see available through PCS for their usage. So there's a survey that he has modified to go out to our community members to gauge their interest in what they think they would like to see in the expansion of PCS. What are the needs that they see that can be met through PCS, through this expansion? So hopefully that should be going out onto our soon so that we can get some community involvement into, and that's in regards to things like a community commercial kitchen, when not only the needs they see immediately, but they really would like to have city input as to what we see PCS, what types of needs that we see that they could help us with.
Is that something the school district could also send out?
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about that as well. So that would be a great thing. PCS does great work here in our city and really help numerous families and individuals. I mean, really hundreds and hundreds of various ways. I would like to see us make this survey available to everyone within our city to have them contribute, get their point of view.
We send a weekly email out on behalf of the city
that has over 300 subscribers to it. So if you provide me with the information and the link, we'll be happy to add that to
Great.
the weekly email.
I appreciate that. That would be wonderful.
And I have to say, I feel like every time I talk to my dad, he's like, well, so I read Ruth Post's little message this week, and then tells me what it said in it. So there are very dedicated readers.
He's keeping an eye on
The
it.
credits for the great artwork in it goes to my deputy, Leilani.
Yeah.
She has upped the game. She takes my simple ideas and ups the game on them.
Oh, cool.
She's pretty wonderful, isn't she? That's a push up there
My
for.
skills in her.
Yeah, that's graphic artistry.
All right.
Thank you.
Are there other counselors who would like to report? Yes.
Well, two things. One, just with the inclusivity committee, we're talking about training, and so hopefully we'll have something after our next inclusivity committee meeting that we can bring to council for review. And then the other thing is that I went to the neighborhood meeting last week. Reason being, I was invited by someone who lives there, but I was surprised that I at least had not heard of it from either council or from staff, and I think that was an issue, especially considering the fact that the mayor did attend and the press was invited. So to that point, I move that the city council be consulted prior to and invited to any press conference held by the city.
Do you have a comment? I'm not.
If there's a second, if there's not a second, I don't know if it's appropriate for me to comment on it.
I guess I'll second it just to discuss.
It seems to me like it was discussed in council that there would be a town hall for the Milk Pond Crossing residents. At least I was aware of it. I don't, since it was specifically for a group of individuals, I don't know that it needed to be a public meeting. It was not noticed as a public meeting.
It was not a public meeting. Public meetings are to the public body, to the council. In fact, I was surprised to see city council members there, and I was glad that only one and the mayor was there. If there had been more, it would have been a public meeting. I would have had to ask people to leave. So it was a neighborhood meeting. So the neighborhood was invited to come and talk to the city manager about the development and answer questions. It wasn't intended to be a public meeting.
Yes.
If I could speak to that, I understand that that was the intention, but also the city manager talking to a large portion of the community with press present is going to be literally taken as the city manager conveying the city's position. And so any activity of this nature, I believe, should be directed by the council, as we're comprised of elected representatives who may actually represent the city.
Yes.
I guess I would be in favor of at least just sort of noticing the council ahead of time, just like, hey, this is going on. I guess I do see potentially the issue of like, and I know like we're a small city and everyone talks to everyone, but just like, you know, if technically we work for the residents and then you work for us, and just the concern of large numbers of residents talking directly to you, of just then we don't know sort of exactly what their concerns are and everything. But I mean, we didn't plan it, so we could have done that, I guess. So I hear where Councilor Andrade is coming from, but I also don't want to like tie your hands too far.
I don't see it as tying my hands. I'm, part of my role as the city manager is to represent you. I do it every day, every minute of every day that I'm here at the office. And when I'm not at the office, that is my job.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a little hard because we don't have like wards, right? Because I feel like the natural solution there would be like, invite the counselor for that ward to come, and then it's that neighborhood still, whereas like all 6 of us plus the mayor represent that neighborhood, so it's like,
So
it's
I invite-
either,
That's a council meeting.
right, exactly, and then it has to be all the formalities of that, but,
So the mayor's the, you know, the
Right.
ceremonial leader, which is why he
Right.
was invited to be there to represent the council, and I was there to have a conversation with residents of Mill Pond. I really don't see an issue.
Yes.
Well, if I may, it's just, I found it very helpful to be there, to have the timeline and all the context available, because I feel like so much of it has come to council in bits and pieces, and I just think that everyone could have benefited from something like that, and to find out that this has happened without even just like, oh, hey, I intend to have this, would you like to attend as well? Like, I feel like that shouldn't have happened.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, I do have to apologize. Was there, who seconded the motion? Thank you.
So there is a motion on the table, which I believe was to publicly notice any.
No, that the city council be consulted prior to and invited to any press conference held by the city, because the fact is that the press was there, and it, as I said, it would be taken as the city manager conveying like our position as the council on behalf of the city.
Christopher?
I guess I don't necessarily know if I like that particular motion, but I might like to talk to you more about maybe something we could, like a policy or something for community outreach events, and then bring that back to the council. Just, I don't know, the phrasing of consulted ahead of time, like what does consultation mean? And then press conference, I wouldn't have called that a press conference. Technically, I would have called it a neighborhood meeting that the press was at. So I think I just want to work out sort of the details maybe a little more, which I think is my concern maybe with that motion. But now I see Matt Lehman making a face. So
I just had a quick question.
Oh, okay.
So was the press there, or was a resident of that neighborhood who happens to be in the
Right.
press there?
The press was invited by email, like both members of the press were
Okay.
invited.
That was my question.
I mean,
Councilor Cocker, did you have a question?
That was that, because I know that we have press people that live in the neighborhood, and I just didn't know if they were there as private citizens or actually.
Yeah,
I
that was
didn't
the question.
see an article about it, did I?
there
Yes.
was one. Because this is how I found out this happened, is someone at my church in Corvallis was like, oh, wow, sounds like you're having a lot of problems with housing. And I was like, pause, why do you say that? So, yes.
Okay, so I haven't seen it, so thanks.
Yes.
I think in considering the press being there, and considering the situation and how much press has been involved in the past in this situation, I think common sense for me would have been, based on prior knowledge of press on articles in the past on this same neighborhood, it made sense to have press there to show progress being made on the openness of communication and and to clarify some things and to have another point of view presented. I think judgment-wise, and I think that sounds feasible that they would be there, because there have been in the past it's more like a clarifying, like a rebuttal, or not really a rebuttal, just a update. So that makes sense that would be there. I mean, that the press would be there to me.
Okay. Yes.
So final comment. One, what if you'd have heard that we'd had a meeting with the neighbors and the press wasn't there? Two, what if you had heard I had a meeting with the neighbors and all of you were invited and it was a public meeting and then none of the neighbors showed up because they didn't want to have a meeting in front of the entire city council. They wanted to ask specific questions of the city manager who's got a grasp on what's going on there. They don't want to come to a public meeting where all of their comments are aired in front of the public audience and put on YouTube. With all of the concerns that are going on there, what I wanted to convey to the neighbors there is that we care about you as new neighbors that are new residents to Philomath, and I'm here for you, and you have my ear, and I'm listening to you. What are your concerns? That was the intent. In the future, could I give a heads up or notice to the council? I could. In this case, I just didn't see the prerogative, invited the mayor to be there to sit in. I see this as a small meeting of the neighbors, which is, again, what I feel like part of what you hire me to do is to be a representative of the city council to the public. I don't know if I was acting out of my capacity in any way. You got a report today, less than 5 days later, of the meeting and what took place there. I just think that's the way going forward. I go to Rotary meetings, I go to Lions Club meetings, I go to Chamber of Commerce meetings. I go to a lot of different meetings throughout the week and throughout the month that I'm in front of other people in the public representing the city council. And I hope that I have the permission and the okay from this council to continue to do that as my work. I do think it would be a little crippling for me to notify the entire city council before I talk to any member of the press or talk to a member of the public or talk to a body of the public. I just don't think that's, to me, that's not in line with the council manager form of government, that you hire the city manager to represent you, I report back to you. And I believe that's the process that we've followed and I'll continue to follow, especially with areas where we've got specific concerns like Mill Pond Crossing. So, I would hope the council wouldn't support the motion. I understand, I guess, some of the concerns, but again, I just think this is not a lack of transparency. I think it shows a lack of trust in the city manager and what the city manager's roles and responsibilities are, and not a lot more than that.
Christopher.
I realize this has probably gotten a little longer than it needs to be, but just, I think I'm certainly, it's not coming across as like we don't trust you or anything. I think it's more just that, I guess in my mind, we don't necessarily hire you to represent us. We hire you to administer the city. And then it's the city council's job to represent the wishes of the city sort of almost to you. So I think where I'm coming from is not like, oh, I don't trust you to talk to residents. It's more just sort of like what Councilman Andrade, I just also like, I'm curious what they have to say, because in 2 years, they're the people that decide if I stay here or not. And we are the people that decide if you stay here or not, kind of. So it's like, since they're the people that we work for, I just feel an obligation to know sort of what they're talking about. So I do think just, and I'm not super like upset about this or anything, but just, I do feel like just trying to, because I feel like, you talk about Rotary and everything. I think that's a little different because that's more like intra-organizational, like that's you as the chief administrator of an organization talking to other organizations, not just residents of a neighborhood. So I think I would just maybe like to, just sort of know what's going on and know sort of, just written out sort of what citizen thoughts were, not because I don't trust you, but just because I have an obligation to also know what they want. And if you're already getting that information, then that's great. And then I know that we have that, I guess, but yeah.
Okay, with that, I would like to call the question. Do we need to repeat the motion? All right. Councilor Andrade, could you repeat the motion, please?
I move that the city council be consulted prior to and invited to any press conference held by the city.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion as stated, please raise your hand and say aye. All those opposed, please raise your hand and say nay. Nay. Motion fails 4-2. All right. With that, I would like to adjourn our meeting for the evening. Thank you all for sharing your thoughts.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
That 2043, I'm not